The conference room door slammed shut, cutting off the prying eyes of my colleagues in the corridor. Su Qing, dressed in a Chanel suit, had a diamond necklace around her neck that stung under the overhead light. It was the wedding anniversary gift I gave her last year. Lin and Mo, haven't you made enough of a scene? She braced her hands on the conference table, her nails tapping on the mahogany surface. You already knew about Zhou Hao and me, so stop playing the victim. Zhou Hao strolled out from behind her, a cup of coffee in his hand. Old Lin, don't make things too ugly. He placed the coffee cup in front of me. Let's part amicably. You get 0.001% of the shares. That'll be enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. I looked at the man and woman before me. One was my wife, married for 5 years. I'd built our life from scratch, even living in a basement with her. The other was the CFO I poached from the investment bank. I doubled his salary and put him in this top-floor office. Su Qing, I spoke softly. I was the one who arranged your mother's heart bypass surgery last month. You said you didn't have enough money, so I transferred 500,000 to your private account. And now you're telling me you and Zhou Hao are the real love? A flicker of panic crossed Su Qing's eyes, quickly replaced by indifference. That's what I deserve. How much hardship have I endured with you to make this company what it is today? So you give 25% of the shares to Zhou Hao, leaving me only 0.001%? I laughed. Do you know how many shares 0.001% is? 100 shares. 100 shares for the founder. Zhou Hao pushed his phone towards me. An electronic contract was displayed on the screen. Sign it. I've already done the financial assessment. Your technology patents are transferred to the company entity, valued at 30 million. The share consideration plus cash compensation will give you a total of 30.01 million. 30.01 million. When I founded this company, I only had 30.000 in the account. Zhou Hao. I turned to look at him. That share issuance plan you did last quarter in the fourth quarter. You found 3 related companies to inflate the valuation, siphoning off 270 million from the company. Where's that money now? Zhou Hao's hand holding the coffee cup paused. He put down his cup, a smile still lingering on his lips. But the smile had turned cold. Lin and Mo, speak with evidence. You're about to leave. Don't cause yourself trouble. Evidence. I pulled a folded A4 sheet from my suit pocket, unfolded it, and pushed it to the center of the table. This is your Swiss account transaction details. On the 15th of last month, there was an inflow of 23 million. The sender was Dinghui Investment, your brother-in-law's company. Su Qing abruptly turned to look at Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao's face visibly paled. You investigated me? He lowered his voice, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. You sidelined my finance team, replacing them with 6 people you brought. But Lao Zhang is still here. He's been with me for 10 years. I said slowly. You think Lao Zhang's sick leave was genuine? He went to see me. Su Qing's voice sharpened. Zhou Hao. Is what he said true? 270 million? Zhou Hao ignored her, staring intently at me. Lin and Mo, what do you want? The share transfer must be completed today. The shareholders' meeting has been scheduled for noon. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:47, 1 hour and 13 minutes to go. I stood up, put the A4 paper back in my pocket, and asked, Su Qing, are you sure you want to stand with him? Su Qing bit her lip. She walked to Zhou Hao and took his arm. I'll call you husband one last time. Sign the papers. Zhou Hao promised me that after I signed, we'd go to the Maldives. I watched her link arms with another man, using one last husband to get my signature. This woman had slept with me for 5 years. She even knew how I got that scar on my back in the 2nd year of my business. I was cornered in the warehouse, protecting the financial documents, when someone smashed them 11 times. Okay, I nodded. I'll go get Lao Zhang and have him bring up the final documents for the share transfer. I turned and walked towards the door. Su Qing called after me. Don't try anything funny. I pushed open the door. Lao Zhang stood in the hallway holding a manila envelope, followed by 2 men in dark gray suits. I recognized one of them, Zhao Yan, the representative of our company's largest investor. President Lin. Zhao Yan extended his hand and shook mine. We understand the situation. You don't need to go to the board meeting. They're my people now. I glanced back at Su Qing and Zhou Hao in the conference room. Su Qing's face was completely drained of color. Zhou Hao suddenly stood up, his chair sliding back more than a meter before crashing against the wall with a loud thud. Zhao Yan, what are you doing here? Zhou Hao's voice trembled. Today is an internal shareholders meeting. Investors aren't eligible to attend. Zhao Yin smiled. President Zhou, don't worry. I'm here as the company's largest creditor. One of your related party transactions last year connected to me. Isn't that a coincidence? Looking at Zhou Hao's completely devastated expression, the tension that had been building for 3 years finally eased a little. I knew what he was after the day he joined the company 3 years ago, but I gave him a chance until he touched Su Qing. Zhou Hao. I walked back to the conference table, picked up the still steaming coffee cup, and asked, when you drank my coffee, did you ever think that the money in your account was actually frozen 3 days ago? The coffee cup slipped from my hand, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. The brown liquid seeped out, like an indelible stain. What do you mean? Zhou Hao's voice trembled. I pointed to the file folder in Lao Zhang's hand. Inside are complete photocopies of the accounts of 3 related companies. Scans of the originals of all the fake contracts you signed. And I paused. The transaction records of you and Su Qing losing 13 million at the Macau casino last year. Su Qing screamed, Lin Mo, are you crazy? You were following me. I wasn't following you. I looked at her. You used the company-issued supplementary credit card. Every transaction is recorded by the finance department. When Zhou Hao let you use it, didn't he tell you that the card was connected to the company's risk control system? Su Qing's face turned completely pale. She released Zhou Hao's arm, took 2 steps back, her high heels clicking on the floor, almost causing her to fall. Zhou Hao lunged at the phone on the table, his fingers trembling as he dialed. Hello? Finance department? Immediately, stop dialing. I interrupted him. The finance department is in a meeting right now. Your 6 people have already handed in their employee badges. Every single one of them is waiting in the break room for the auditors to arrive. The receiver slipped from Zhou Hao's hand, dangling from the edge of the table, the voice on the other end asking hello. Su Qing suddenly rushed over and grabbed my sleeve. Lin Mo, you can't do this. We've been husband and wife for a while. Husband and wife? I shook off her hand. Su Qing, what did you just tell me? You have to sign whether you want to or not? When you told me to get out with 0.001%, did you think about our marriage? She burst into tears. Tears washed away her makeup, leaving a black streak. Mascara smeared on her lower eyelids, making her look extremely disheveled. Zhou Hao slumped into his chair, his forehead covered in sweat. His tie askew. Zhao Yin took the file folder from Lao Zhang and dusted it off. President Lin, the people outside have arrived. Zhou Hao, you are involved in embezzlement, fraudulent transactions, misappropriation of funds, and commercial fraud. The court summons will be delivered to the company this afternoon. Until then, you have the right to remain silent. Zhou Hao suddenly looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Lin Mo, you planned this all along. You deliberately let me in. Deliberately let me see the financial loopholes. You walked right into this mess. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the traffic below. 3 years ago, on the day you came for the interview, I knew the true relationship between that former company on your resume and you. But I hired you because I knew that if you put a nail in a wall, it will eventually sprout. Sunlight streamed through the glass, and my shadow fell on the conference table, covering the torn pieces of the agreement. Su Qing knelt down, crying, picking up the scraps of paper, one by one, her fingers trembling violently. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with pleading, fear, and something else I couldn't understand. Lin Mo, her voice was hoarse. I was wrong. Please forgive me, don't pick it up. I said. She froze, clutching a few scraps of paper in her hand. That contract was just scrap paper anyway. I took out my phone from my pocket and showed her a text message. 3 days ago, all the shares under my name had been transferred to a trust. 0.001% was left for you, just for you to sign for fun. Su Qing's hand loosened, and the scraps of paper fell back onto the carpet. Zhou Hao suddenly laughed, his laughter hoarse and maniacal. Lin Mo, you never intended to leave, did you? You were waiting for me to make my move from the very beginning. Yes. I looked at him. I've waited 3 years. From the first day you got Su Qing drunk at the party. I've been waiting. 2 men behind Zhao Yin stepped forward, grabbing Zhou Hao's arms on either side. Zhou Hao struggled a couple of times, a button popping off his suit jacket and rolling to Su Qing's feet. Su Qing picked up the button, suddenly stood up, and slammed it hard into my face. Lin Mo, you're not human. You watched me with him, and I gave you a chance. My cheek felt like it had been flicked. It didn't hurt, but it stung a little. Last year on your birthday, I booked a restaurant and called you 17 times. What were you doing? You were in the car with him downstairs at the company. Su Qing's sobs stopped abruptly. This spring festival, you said you were going back to your parents' home, and I booked your plane ticket. But the flight information showed you went to Sanya, and the hotel booking record used Zhou Hao's ID. I watched her back slowly hunch over. Last month, you said you needed working capital for a new project, so you transferred 800.000 yuan from my card. That money went through 3 hands before ending up in his Hong Kong account. Don't say anymore. Su Qing covered her ears. I've been waiting. I took a step closer to her, waiting for the day you would say to me, Linamo, let's make it work. I waited until this morning, waiting for you to hand me a 0.001% equity transfer agreement. Su Qing slumped to the ground, her makeup completely ruined. She looked up at me. Her lips moved a few times, but no sound came out. Zhao Yan glanced at his watch. President Lin, it's almost time. There are still procedures to go through with the board meeting. I nodded. I turned and walked towards the door. Zhou Hao suddenly shouted behind me, Linamo, so what if you won? Do you know how much the company's stock price will drop today? Your investors, I stopped. Without turning around. Zhao Yan, tell him who the actual controller of Dinghui Investment is. Zhao Yan cleared his throat. Zhou Hao, the 270 million you took from Dinghui was actually transferred from President Lin's own fund. He set up a special fund 3 years ago, waiting for your related parties to take the bait. Zhou Hao was completely speechless. From day one, you've been swallowing my money. I pushed open the door. You can calculate the value of your 25% yourself. The corridor was quiet. Sunlight streamed in from the window at the end, falling on the mosaic floor. My leather shoes stepped through the dappled sunlight, walking step by step towards the elevator. Behind me, I heard Su Qing's heart-wrenching sobs and Zhou Hao silent, heavy breathing from the conference room. I didn't turn around. As the elevator doors opened, Zhao Yan followed. Mr. Lin, regarding Su Qing, follow the procedure. I pressed the button. The divorce agreement would be delivered to her this afternoon. She can have her share of the assets. It's all in the trust anyway. The elevator began its descent, the numbers ticking away. I pulled the A4 sheet of paper from my pocket, the transaction records for Zhou Hao's Swiss account. A line of small print was printed on the back. Written 3 days ago, thank you for giving me a reason. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. The elevator reached the first floor. When the doors opened, the lobby was bustling with people. No one knew what had just happened on the top floor. I walked through the revolving doors outside. The sunlight was blinding, the wind a little chilly. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Su Qing. Only 3 words. You won. I didn't reply. I silenced my phone and hailed a taxi. The driver asked where I was going. I said, to the Civil Affairs Bureau. As the car started moving, I adjusted the seat back a little. The outline of the company building was reflected in the rearview mirror, its glass curtain wall reflecting the sunlight, so bright it was blinding. I rolled down the window, letting in a gust of wind that dispelled the stuffiness that had accumulated along the way. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was Zhao Yan. The board of directors has approved Zhou Hao's dismissal. Su Qing's board seat has been revoked, and you regain 100% voting rights. I replied with a single word. Okay. The car turned onto the elevated highway, the city unfolding on both sides. I remembered that winter 5 years ago, when Su Qing said to me, let's start a business together. Her eyes shining. She was wearing an old down jacket then, her breath drifting under the streetlights like shredded paper today. Some things, once torn, can never be put back together, but some things should never be whole in the first place. I closed my eyes, the taxi speeding up in the afternoon sun. When the taxi stopped in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau, my phone rang 27 times. Su Qing's number lit up 17 times. Zhou Hao's 10 times. I blocked them all and bought a bottle of water at a roadside convenience store. As I unscrewed the cap, I saw Zhao Yan get out of a black sedan. He was wearing a light gray suit, completely different from the perpetually gloomy investor representative I remembered. Mr. Lin, I've had the paperwork prepared. He handed me a file folder. Regarding your wife, my legal team has drafted the divorce agreement. The property division section is blank. You can fill it in however you like. I finished my water and threw the bottle in the trash. What about Zhou Hao? The audit team has moved in. All his properties and vehicles are frozen. And his brother-in-law's shell company was deregistered by the Business Registration Authority this morning. The exact amount involved is still being verified, but the preliminary estimate is over 400 million. Zhao Yan paused. He can't escape. I took the file folder but didn't open it immediately. The sun was scorching the asphalt. A wedding car slowly drove past us, its hood adorned with red roses, the plastic petals rustling in the wind. Mr. Lin, there's something I need to confirm with you. Zhao Yan took a half step closer, lowering his voice. Your ex-wife, President Su, she just called our company's legal department, saying she's going to report you for suspected tax evasion. I chuckled. What did she say? She said there's a problem with the valuation of your company's technology patents, and that you used nominee shareholders when you registered the company, meaning your actual capital contribution was not genuine. She listed 17 points. Quite detailed indeed. Where did she get this information? Zhao Yan adjusted his glasses. Zhou gave it to me. They must have prepared it in advance. This document looks like it was drafted about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Back then, Su Qing still made me breakfast every day, always frying eggs on one side, sprinkling a little black pepper. And when she brought it to the table on a white porcelain plate, she would lean down and kiss my forehead. I really didn't expect her to act to that extent. Let her report it. I opened the back door of the taxi. Have the legal department prepare all the capital verification reports and bank statements from the founding period. The originals are on the 3rd floor of the company's safe. The password is 6 sixes. Also, when I told her I evaded taxes, I casually mentioned that I did the assessment of that asset pool myself, so she wouldn't do an unprofessional audit. Zhao Yan smiled. Understood. The taxi drove away from the Civil Affairs Bureau. I saw Zhao Yan standing there making a phone call in the rearview mirror. The wind blew up the hem of his suit jacket, revealing a black walkie-talkie clipped to his waist. I didn't ask how many people he brought to clean up the mess. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. I answered, and Su Qing's voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable, with a sob in it. Linimo, don't hang up. Let me finish. Those reports. I was out of my mind. Zhou Hao forced me to do it. He said he could settle things as long as you went in. He can't. I said, Su Qing, where did you learn the word tax evasion? You can't even read the company's profit and loss statement. Did he teach you that? There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. Yes. You did whatever he told you to do. You transferred your shares when he told you to. You divorced me when he told you to. My voice was calm. Have you thought about what you'd do when he makes you take the blame? Su Qing's breathing quickened. No, he said that. What did he say? He'll take the blame if anything happens? He said that to you? Su Qing didn't speak, but I heard her sniffle. He can't take the blame. I said, the first accusation in the report you sent, regarding the technology patent, uses a forged signature as evidence. Do you really think it's my signature? I was abroad last October. I can check my flight records and immigration stamps. He didn't even coordinate the timeline when he forged it. You've been acting with him for so long, and you still can't see through this? Su Qing suddenly let out a short scream, followed by the sound of something breaking. She smashed something over there, probably a phone or a vase. I listened for a while, waiting for her to calm down, before saying, I had Zhao Yan send you the divorce agreement. Whether you sign it or not is up to you. After 2 years of separation, the divorce will be granted. I won't pursue your mother's 500,000 yuan surgery fee, but I'll make Zhou Hao cough up every penny he spent. Linimo, her voice trembled. Can I go home and talk to you? Go talk to Zhou Hao. Anyway, his house is sealed off now. You can go stay with him for a couple of days. I hung up the phone and blocked the number. The taxi stopped downstairs at my apartment. It wasn't really my apartment, but a 2-bedroom, 1 living room unit I'd only rented last month. All the furniture was new. Even the wall clock wasn't set properly. I texted Zhao Yan from the elevator. What time is the press conference this afternoon? 3 o'clock. The media are all here. You can come in through the back door. I returned to my apartment, turned on my computer, and the company's intranet was buzzing with activity. A statement was pinned to the top of the employee forum, signed by the Interim Management Committee. It stated that CFO Zhou Hao was suspended from duty for personal reasons and under investigation. The board of directors had passed a resolution to remove him, and founder Lin Mo had been reinstated with full management authority. The comments section was densely packed, spanning dozens of pages. Some cheered, some were terrified, and several anonymous comments questioned the company's cash flow. I closed the forum and opened my email. There were over 300 unread emails, one of which was from Su Qing, sent at 4:17 a.m. this morning. The email body contained only one sentence. Lin Mo, have you truly never loved me? I hovered my cursor over the reply button for a minute, then deleted the email. At 2:40 p.m., I entered the press conference venue through the back door. Several veteran employees in the corridor saw me, their eyes reddening. Old Zhang stood by the door, holding a thick stack of documents. He told me, President Lin, all 6 people Zhou Hao hired have been recruited. One of the finance specialists was still an intern. She cried last night, saying Zhou Hao forced her to sign blank checks. What was that intern's name? Lu Yu. Let her return to her post, with her salary paid as usual. Also, notify the HR department to give her a permanent position. Old Zhang hesitated for a moment, then nodded vigorously. At 3 p.m. sharp, the press conference began. As I walked onto the stage, a flurry of flashbulbs went off. Reporters below the stage pushed forward, microphones in hand, bombarding me with questions like bullets. Mr. Lin, there are rumors circulating online that your company's CFO is suspected of embezzlement. Is this true? I heard that your ex-wife is also involved in an equity dispute. Will this affect the company's operations? The company's stock price dropped by 7% this morning. What measures do you have in place? I stood in front of the microphone, waiting for them to quiet down. Old Zhang gave me an okay sign from the side of the stage, indicating that the live broadcast signal was normal. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice amplified by the speakers, drowning out the last few reporters' questions. This morning at 10 a.m., someone attempted to transfer their company shares through irregular means. This behavior involves related party transaction fraud and financial fraud. We have collected evidence according to law and handed it over to the auditing firm for processing. The audience erupted in uproar. Regarding the company's operations, I would like to make a special statement here. I pulled a folded bank voucher from my pocket, unfolded it, and held it up to the camera. This was a special fund I personally injected into the company 3 years ago, amounting to 420 million renminbi. This fund entered the company through 7 investment entities via capital increase and share expansion. The financial staff member handling it at the time was Mr. Zhou Hao, who is now suspended from his position. A male reporter wearing glasses immediately raised his hand. Mr. Lin, what is the nature of this fund? If it was your personal investment, why did you use related investment entities? Because I was setting a trap. I turned the bank voucher towards the audience so that the reporters in the first row could see clearly that when Mr. Zhou Hao joined the company 3 years ago, his resume showed that he had worked at CDH Investments. But in reality, the legal representative of CDH Investments was his wife's brother, and he himself had always been a hidden shareholder of CDH. Someone with a vested interest came to apply for my CFO position. If I didn't set up a trap for him, how could he reveal his true colors? The audience erupted in commotion again. A female reporter asked sharply, "Are you saying you designed a trap from the beginning? What was your ex-wife's, role in it?" I glanced at her. This question involves personal privacy, so I won't comment. I can only say that I will resolve my marital issues in a legal and compliant manner, and it won't affect the company's interests. The reporter was clearly dissatisfied with this answer, but Lao Zhang quickly stepped forward and took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the press conference is now over. Please pay attention to the company's announcements for further developments. As I walked off the stage, the television in the corridor was playing live commentary from a financial channel. A female host in a red suit was saying, "This may be the most bizarre business war case in recent years, with the founder having orchestrated a scheme within his own company for 3 years." I turned off the television. Zhao Yan was waiting for me at the end of the corridor. He handed me a cup of hot tea, the oolong tea brand I used to drink often. Zhou Hao is in the hospital now. He said that when the audit team first arrived, he lost control of his emotions and banged his head against the wall. He needed 7 stitches and is currently under observation in the hospital. He was faking it. I took a sip of tea. With his personality, he wouldn't admit defeat until the very last moment. Banging his head against the wall was to buy time, giving his outsiders a chance to handle the final payment. Zhao Yan raised an eyebrow. How did you know? Because he hit his left temple, and the security camera was in the right corridor. He chose a blind spot. and the force was just enough to draw blood but not knock him unconscious. This guy has a strong ability to calculate in an emergency. I witnessed that 3 years ago when I interviewed him. Zhao Yin was silent for 2 seconds. What about the hospital? Arrange for 2 people to guard him. Don't let him access any communication devices. If his people outside don't get any news, they'll make a move, and that will give them away. Also, notify the finance department to rescreen all outward payment records from the past 3 years, focusing on keywords like consulting fees, service fees, and technical cooperation, tracing each transaction over 500.000. Zhao Yin took out his phone and started recording. Anything else? Also, help me get Su Qing's mother out of the hospital and arrange for her to go to another private hospital. The fees will be paid from my personal account. Don't let Su Qing find her. Zhao Yan's hand paused. You're still concerned about her mother? The old woman didn't do anything wrong. I placed my teacup on the windowsill. Outside, the city's concrete jungle stretched out, the afternoon sun painting the glass curtain wall golden. Su Qing and her mother didn't get along, but Zhou Hao was known for using elders to threaten people. It was best to be cautious. After Zhao Yin left, I sat on a bench in the corridor and finished my tea. My phone rang again. This time it was an urgent message from the company's legal director. He forwarded me a document, an anonymous letter Zhou Hao had sent late last night via his private email to all shareholders. The letter listed over a dozen so-called risks to the company's operations, with particular emphasis on my case. It accused me of being a fraudster who used marriage to acquire shares, claiming that the true founder was Ms. Su Qing, and accusing me of seizing my wife's assets through psychological manipulation and emotional blackmail. Every word was written with blood and tears. Like a victim, I read it 3 times and then sent a voice message to the legal director. I instructed him to have the letter notarized and include the complete email sending record. I also needed to check the usage logs of Zhou Hao's private computer to see what keywords he had searched before writing the letter. Retrieving all the records. After sending the voice message, I flipped my phone face down on the bench. A window at the end of the corridor let in the spring breeze, carrying the smell of dust from the distant construction site. I closed my eyes, and the afternoon 3 years ago involuntarily surfaced in my mind. The day Zhou Hao came for the interview. He wore a dark blue shirt, the sleeves rolled up to mid-forearm, revealing a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. I asked him why he wanted to switch from investment banking to a startup. He looked at me, a smile playing on his lips, and said he felt he had a future working for Boss Lin. His resume that day listed him as an external consultant at CDH Investments, but I knew that company belonged to his brother-in-law. After the interview, I had Lao Zhang check CDH's business registration records. The name of the legal representative was the same as Zhou Hao's wife's surname. From that day on, I knew he wasn't there to work for me. But Su Qing didn't know. She first met Zhou Hao at the company's annual party. That night, he stood beside her with a glass of red wine, talking to her with his head down. Just like during the interview, his eyes were focused and deep as he looked at her, as if she were the only person left in the world. At that time, I was standing at the bar 10 meters away, holding a glass of watered-down whiskey. I watched Su Qing being amused by him, watched her reach out to pat his arm, watched the light in her eyes, the light she hadn't shown me in a long time. I should have rushed over. I should have smashed my glass and gone over, or at least fired Zhou Hao the next day. But I didn't, because at that time, I was thinking that if Su Qing could be so easily taken away by someone else, she would leave sooner or later. Rather than waiting for her to leave without my knowledge, it's better to let her leave right under my nose. This thought was cold, but 3 years later, sitting in this corridor recalling that moment, I find that I still don't regret it. The television in the corridor suddenly turned on by itself. The financial channel had a different host, reading out today's stock market closing data. I heard my name come through the speakers. Lin Mo's company recovered its losses in the final minutes of trading, ultimately closing up 1.2%, suspected to be due to large funds entering the market to support it. I opened my eyes, looking at the chart on the TV screen. The red line had risen sharply in the last hour, like a knife suddenly drawn. My phone lit up. Zhao Yin had sent a WeChat message. The hospital arrangements are all set. Also, Zhou Hao is awake. He wants to see you. I typed back, tell him to wait. I finished the last sip of tea, crumpled the paper cup, and threw it in the trash. Outside the window at the end of the corridor, the city skyline was dyed orange-red by the setting sun. A few birds flew through the gaps between buildings, their flapping shadows flashing across the glass before disappearing. I stood up and straightened my tie. The press conference was over, but the real show was yet to come. Zhou Hao wanted to see me. I wanted to see him too, but not now. The hospital Zhou Hao was staying at was in the west of the city. A very ordinary six-story building with off-white tiles on the exterior walls, a few of which had chipped away, revealing the cement underneath. I went there the next morning. Two young men in black coats were having breakfast at the door. When they saw me, they put their buns into a plastic bag, stood up, and nodded. Mr. Lin. He's on the third floor, in the second room on the left. Mr. Zhao arranged for us to take turns watching over him. Last night, he confiscated all his cell phones and computers, leaving only a TV for him to watch the news. What did he watch last night? The news channel, the financial channel, and a legal program. A legal program? Which episode? The young man thought for a moment. A replay about cases of commercial fraud. He watched it quite attentively, even writing something on a piece of tissue paper by the bedside. I went upstairs. The ward door was ajar, and I could hear the TV playing softly inside. I pushed the door open. Zhou Hao was half lying on the bed, his forehead wrapped in gauze, and in drip in the back of his left hand. He didn't move when he saw me come in, but simply put down the TV remote. "You're late," he said. My voice is still hoarse. "I thought you would come last night. You couldn't wait?" I pulled up a chair and sat at the foot of his bed. "What do you want to say?" "You can say it now." Zhou Hao stared at me for a few seconds, then laughed. His laugh was exactly the same as 3 years ago. The corner of his mouth slightly turned to the right. His eyes narrowed like a cat spotting its prey. "Lin Mo, you won this round. But you didn't win everything." He slowly propped himself up against the headboard. "You set me up. I admit it. But have you ever considered why I dared to play such a high-stakes game with you? Because you have someone behind you." Zhou Hao's smile froze for a tenth of a second. He recovered quickly, but it was enough for me to see. "Yes, I have someone behind me." His voice was low. "You thought that 420 million was bait you used to lure me in? 200 million of that was other people's money. When you used it to lure me, the real owner of that money was also watching you." I didn't reply. Zhou Hao continued. "You investigated Dinghui investment, but you didn't investigate Dinghui's upstream. Do you know who's one level above that shell company? It's Ma Yuan Industry. Ma Yuan's legal representative is Qin Li, and Qin Li was your father's partner back then. After your father passed away, that money changed hands 3 times before finally ending up in your company's account as your personal capital injection. But have you ever wondered why Qin Li was willing to let you use that money?" I tapped my finger on my knee. Zhou Hao saw this, and his smile widened. "Lin Mo, when you were investigating me, weren't you surprised that someone from investment banking would choose your small company? Because you have something Qin Li wants. He doesn't want your company's shares. He wants that special approval document from the Ministry of Science and Technology in your possession." The air conditioner in the hospital room hummed. Sunlight streamed in through the window, casting a rectangular patch of light on the white sheets. Zhou Hao reached out and traced the edge of that patch with his fingertip, as if drawing a line. "That approval document was left by your father before his accident. This was his only possession. Qin Li searched for 8 years and finally found it in your hands. Where did you hide it? In a safe? In a bank escrow? Or your ex-wife's family?" My breath hitched. Zhou Hao keenly caught this moment. "Oh, it's with Su Qing. She left the approval document at her mother's house. Didn't she?" I stood up. The chair leg scraped sharply on the floor. "Zhou Hao, are you begging or threatening me now?" "Neither." He spread his hands, revealing the medical tape on his wrists. "I'm making a deal with you. You give me the approval document, and I'll give you all of Qin Li's materials. With those materials, you can not only completely turn the tables, but also uncover your father's past." I looked at him. Sunlight shone on half of his face, and a trace of blood seeped from the wound under the gauze, forming a small dark red bead on his forehead. "Why do you think I'll believe you?" "Because you have no other choice." Zhou Hao's voice suddenly became calm, a calmness with an unwavering certainty. "Qin Li's people are already on their way. When you mentioned the 420 million at the press conference yesterday, he knew the thing was in your hands. He wants the approval document, not your life. But he never cares about the methods when he wants something. You know better than I where Su Qing's mother is. Aren't you curious how the name of that second hospital reached his ears within an hour after you transferred her there? The ward door was suddenly pushed open. Zhao Yin rushed in, his face ashen. He paused for a moment when he saw Zhou Hao and me facing off, then quickly walked to my side. President Lin, something's happened at the hospital. Su Qing's mother was just taken away. The nurse said 2 people came with a family authorization form, with Su Qing's signature and fingerprint on it. I looked at Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao leaned against the headboard, his eyes closed, a faint smile playing on his lips. The blood on his forehead finally slid down, running down his nose and cheek, making him look sickly and ferocious. I told you, Qin Li's men are already on their way. He opened one eye to look at me. When you hit her, didn't you think that your ex-wife has nowhere to go now? She'll see anyone, as long as Qin Li finds her and says, "I'll get the permit back for you." She'll obediently sign. Zhao Yan's hand pressed down on my shoulder, the pressure heavy. President Lin, what do we do now? Where exactly is the approval document? I'll have someone retrieve it immediately. I pressed Zhao Yan's wrist, removing him from my shoulder. No need to go. Zhou Hao paused, stunned. The approval document wasn't with Su Qing. I looked into his eyes. 3 years ago, after I learned you had ulterior motives for joining the company, I took the approval document from Su Qing's family home. She never knew it existed, and neither did her mother. Zhou Hao's smile finally cracked. Impossible. That approval document was your father's heirloom. Before your mother passed away, my mother gave it to me before she died. Not to Su Qing. I walked to the bedside, leaning over to look at Zhou Hao's suddenly pale face. You spent 3 years, dating and sleeping with Su Qing, conspiring, all for a place that doesn't even exist. Have you been acting for nothing? Zhou Hao's Adam's apple bobbed violently. His right hand clenched the sheet tightly, the 4-needle twitching against the back of his hand, drawing a small ring of blood. I don't believe it. His voice was so low it was almost inaudible. I don't believe you could have predicted this 3 years ago. I didn't foresee you ending up with Su Qing. I straightened up, but I did foresee you being Qin Li's man. I investigated your entire background the first day you joined the company, including the 4 financial transactions between you and Moyuan Industry during your time at investment banking. Qin Li has a record of every single payment you made. Do you want to see how much more information I have than you know? Zhao Yin pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase and poured out a stack of printed bank statements. The papers fell onto the white sheets. The densely packed numbers spread out. When Zhou Hao's gaze fell on the top line, he convulsed violently. This is my private account transaction with Qin Li. You think you can't find out just because you opened an overseas account in his wife's name? I pulled out one of the papers and held it up in front of him. On December 23rd last year, Qin Li's wife's account transferred $6 million to you, with a note consulting fee. You exchanged that money for Hong Kong dollars on a Forex platform that same day, and then transferred it to your escrow account in Singapore in 3 separate transactions. Each transfer was less than $50,000 USD. Circumventing regulations, a very skillful method. You must have done a lot of this kind of thing for people when you were in investment banking, right? Zhou Hao's breathing quickened. He reached out to grab the paper, but the 4-line connected to the indwelling needle pulled his hand back. You're giving it to me, give it to you? I put the paper back in the envelope. These are photocopies. The originals are already in the audit file. If you still want to talk about a deal, think about what else you have to offer me in exchange. The air in the ward froze. The television was still playing softly, a presenter cheerfully announcing the weather forecast, saying there would be widespread rainfall tomorrow, reminding citizens to bring umbrellas. Zhao Yin put the envelope back in his bag and stood behind me. Mr. Lin, someone's here downstairs at the hospital. 2 cars, a black Audi and a silver minivan, were parked at the back door with the engines running. Zhou Hao suddenly burst into laughter, his shoulders shaking with mirth. Qin Li was here. Lin, you're finished. You flipped the table in front of the media, which is tantamount to telling him, what you want is here. He won't leave until he gets the approval. And you won't be leaving this hospital. I interrupted him. It's good that Qin Li is here. Zhou Hao's laughter caught in his throat. Zhao Yin. I turned to him and said, have the people downstairs prepare to invite Qin Li up. This ward on the 3rd floor is big enough for him to sit down. Zhao Yin hesitated for a moment. President Lin, Qin Li, I know what kind of person he is. I drew back the curtains of the ward, letting more sunlight in. He was my father's old partner. I've called him Uncle Chin since I was a child. He wants the approval, and I also have some questions for him. Sure enough, a black Audi was parked at the back door of the emergency building, its hood reflecting a blinding glare in the sunlight. I stood at the window looking at the car. The door wasn't open, but there seemed to be two figures sitting behind the windshield. Zhou Hao called out from behind. Linimo, you think Qin Li is still the Uncle Qin you know? He had people beat up your dad. I know, I said, without looking back. I knew it when I was 13. The ward suddenly fell silent. Even the sound of the television seemed hollow. The host had finished the weather report and switched to a commercial. A woman gently promoting a laundry detergent. Zhao Yan took a soft breath. I turned around and looked at Zhou Hao. Guess why he searched for that permit for 8 years without finding it? Because it was fake. My father left me something else. The permit was just a lure, used to bait people like Qin Li. I put it somewhere everyone could find it, deliberately letting it slip by, and waited 8 years. You're here, and Qin Li will be here soon. All of you. Just as my dad predicted back then. Zhou Hao's lips trembled. Your dad. He deliberately lost back then. I said. He knew all along that Qin Li had people around him, but he couldn't get rid of them. So he left a bait, so I could reel it in when I grew up. Sunlight streamed in through the window, illuminating the entire ward. The curtains billowed in the wind, rising and falling like a silent breath. The sound of a car door closing came from downstairs. The back seat of a black Audi opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a dark gray Zhongshan suit. His hair was graying. His back was ramrod straight, and he walked at a moderate pace. I saw him look up and glance at the window on the 3rd floor. Qin Li had arrived. The person I had waited for 8 years had finally come. Zhao Yan reached into his briefcase, and I pressed down on his wrist. Don't move. Let him come up. The sound of leather shoes clicking on the floor tiles echoed down the corridor, each step steady and even. Zhou Hao shrank back on the bed, as if instinctively trying to avoid the sound. The footsteps stopped at the door of the ward. The door opened. Qin Li stood in the doorway, the corridor's fluorescent light casting a long shadow into the ward. He saw me and smiled slightly. Xiaomo, you've grown up. Zhou Hao's message to see me came from Zhao Yan at 2 in the morning. I had just finished reading the first round of audit reports from the technical team. The cold light from my phone screen flashed briefly in the darkness. I saw those words while drinking my 5th glass of water. He couldn't sleep. Zhao Yan's voice message was brief, with the hollow echoes unique to hospital corridors in the background. I replied with a text, let him endure it. I'll go tomorrow morning. The next morning at 7 o'clock, I arrived at the hospital just as dawn was breaking. The 6-story building in the west of the city looked particularly old in the morning light. A thin layer of dew had formed on the gaps in the missing tiles on the exterior walls, reflecting tiny specks of light under the sun. 2 young men in black coats had changed shifts at the door. The new one was carrying soy milk, and when he saw me, he hid the plastic bag behind his back. Mr. Lin, Zhou Hao was up all night last night. First, he pulled out the 4. Then he kept demanding to see a lawyer. Mr. Zhao arranged for someone to reinsert the needle. And then he started smashing things on the bedside table. Now the ward is smashed up, leaving only a bed and a chair. What did he say while he was smashing things? It was just 2 sentences over and over. One was, Lin Mo, you schemed against me. And the other was, where's Su Qing? Where's Su Qing? I went upstairs. The ward door was open. And sure enough, it was a mess. The bedside table was overturned, and the contents of the drawers were scattered everywhere. Mostly hospital admission notices and several expired payment slips. Zhou Hao sat on the edge of the bed. The gauze on his forehead had been replaced, but he wasn't wearing shoes, and his left big toe was wrapped in tape, a wound from stepping on broken glass yesterday. When he saw me come in, he wasn't as agitated as I had imagined. He just looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, but his expression was calm, a calmness born of utter exhaustion after a whole night of staying up. Where's Su Qing? He asked, his voice so hoarse it was almost unrecognizable. She hasn't come back since you called her to the company yesterday afternoon. Her phone is off, and her mother isn't at the hospital either. Where did you take her? I pulled up the only remaining chair and sat down, the chair legs scraping against the floor with a short, sharp sound. In that anonymous letter you wrote at the press conference yesterday, you wrote a lot about her, calling me a swindler who used marriage to acquire shares, and saying she was the true founder. Since you're so protective of her, How come you didn't know she signed the divorce papers yesterday? Zhou Hao's Adam's apple bobbed. He looked down at his toes, which were wrapped in tape, and remained silent for a long time. She signed? She didn't want anything? She wrote 0. Zhou Hao's lips twitched. That's just how she is. She acts impulsively, without considering anything. She says she doesn't want anything, but she'll regret it later. You know her. Every month, she has a few nights when she can't sleep, tossing and turning, then gets up in the early morning to write you long text messages, then deletes them. You even know she has insomnia. I interrupted him. When did she tell you about this? Zhou Hao raised his eyelids and glanced at me. When you weren't home. Last summer. During the 2 weeks you were away on a business trip to Shenzhen. She called me every night, and each call lasted 2 or 3 hours. She cried on the phone, saying she didn't know what she was doing, that she felt sorry for you. But the next day, she would message me again saying, Zhou Hao, let's continue. His hand gripped the sheets, his knuckles turning white from the force. Do you know why she keeps going back and forth? I said, because she's indecisive. Because she's afraid of you. I looked into his eyes. The first time she went out to dinner alone with you was a drinking party you arranged, and you spiked her drink. The next day, she woke up to find herself in your bed, and you took pictures and threatened her not to tell anyone. From that day on, you've had her under your thumb. Every continue was forced upon her by you. Zhou Hao suddenly stood up. His face instantly flushed red. The skin beneath the wound on his forehead taut, as if it were about to split open. You're lying. It was clearly her initiative. Her initiative for what? Contacting you first? I took out my phone from my pocket, opened an audio file. This was a voice message she sent you this January. Listen to it yourself. I pressed play. Su Qing's voice came through the speaker, trembling with obvious sobs. Zhou Hao, I beg you, please delete those photos. Okay, I'll do whatever you say. Just don't send them to my husband. Zhou Hao's face went from flushed to deathly pale. He lunged forward to grab the phone, but I pulled it back. He missed, staggered, and his knee hit the edge of the overturned bedside table with a dull thud. Where did you get this? His voice trembled. This is what she sent me privately, every voice message, every photo, every document you made me sign that she sent you privately. She forwarded to my encrypted email address. I put the phone back in my pocket. Before she signed the first nominee agreement last July, she sent me an email that afternoon with the subject line, Lin Mo save me. That email included screenshots of all your chat logs. She didn't dare tell me in person, but she kept all the evidence because she knew what kind of person you were. She was leaving herself an escape route from the very beginning. Zhou Hao slumped to the floor. The hospital bed behind him swayed with his movement. The four-stand wobbled twice and fell onto his shoulder. But he didn't even flinch. So you two conspired to put on a show for me? His voice was so low it was almost inaudible. Su Qing reporting to me about you every month. Signing the agreements I gave her. Going to Sanya with me. It was all an act for me? She wasn't acting. Her fear of you was real. Her insomnia every month was real too. But she was also saving herself. She kept a copy of all the evidence of your threats against her. Because she knew better than you that you were unreliable. Zhou Hao's hand groped on the floor, finding a shard of an amphor bottle that had fallen somewhere. His fingers touched the edge of the shard, then slowly clenched, the glass cutting his palm, blood dripping from between his fingers onto the floor tiles. He opened his mouth and smiled silently. That smile made his whole face look distorted and pitiful. Lin Mou1. He clutched the shards of glass in his hand, his voice suddenly calming. You and Su Qing have been acting for 3 years, waiting for me to walk right into your trap. Now you're telling me this to see me break down? I'm here to tell you something else. I stood up, walked to the window, and drew back the curtains. The Qin Li you mentioned yesterday, I had him investigated. The Qin Li you spoke of is just his public identity. His real background is that of the son-in-law of Chen Zhangwo, the previous controller of Moyuan Industry. 8 years ago, Chen Zhangwo was investigated for economic crimes and died of a sudden heart attack during the investigation. Afterwards, all the shares of Moyuan Industry were transferred to Qin Li's name. But a week before Chen Zhangwo's death, his private lawyer filed a statement with the notary office, mentioning that Moyuan Industry had a large amount of fictitious capital injection and shadow shares. And the actual owner of those assets was, I turned back, looking into Zhou Hao's eyes. It's your father. The air in the ward seemed to freeze. The air conditioner vents were still humming. the cold air condensing into a thin layer of chill on my back. Zhou Hao sat on the ground, his hand still clutching the shard of glass. Blood stained his palm, dripping into the cracks of the floor tiles. His lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Your father, Zhou Mingyuan, was Chen Zhangwo's financial advisor 8 years ago. I continued. The night Chen Zhangwo suffered his sudden heart attack, your father had dinner with him at the same person's house. Qin Li was also at the table. 3 hours after that meal, Chen Zhangwo had his accident. And the next morning, your father transferred all his assets to your mother's name and went on a business trip to Australia, never to return. Zhou Hao's fingers loosened. The shard of glass fell to the ground with a crisp, short sound. There was a deep, bone-revealing wound on his palm, blood gushing out and pooling in a small puddle in his outstretched hand. Linimo, he called my name, his voice like a bubble rising from a deep place. How much did you investigate? I started investigating from the day you joined the company. I said, your resume lists CDH Investments as your former company. But your relationship with CDH Investments wasn't based on employment. You were one of CDH's actual investors. That money was transferred back from Australia by your father through underground money changers. In 37 separate transactions. Each transaction wasn't large, but they totaled 21 million. Zhou Hao looked down at his bleeding palm, the mocking smile on his lips finally vanishing completely. He slumped like a deflated balloon, his back bent, his shoulders slumped, curled up in a ball amidst the mess. What do you want with me? His voice was very soft. Put me in jail too. Like Chen Zhangwo. Sudden heart attack? I'm a legitimate businessman. I walked up to him, squatted down to meet his gaze, and said, I've had your father's address in Australia found. He lives in a Chinese community now and feeds pigeons in a nearby park every afternoon. If you cooperate with me to complete Qin Li's entire evidence-gathering process, I can let you speak to him on the phone once. Zhou Hao suddenly looked up. A complex mix of emotions suddenly welled up in his bloodshot eyes, like light, like tears, choking back a moment before finally falling. Really? I said. I keep my word. I stood up. But you have to hand over all the materials you have about Qin Li, encrypted compressed files, paper documents, verbal evidence, everything related to your father. Nothing less. Zhou Hao remained silent for a long time. Blood had already seeped from his palm to the edge of the floor tiles, staining the white floorboards with a dark red ring. He nodded. Okay, I'll give it to you. I turned and walked to the door. Zhao Yan was standing outside, holding a tablet. Seeing me come out, he lowered his voice and said, the technical team is ready. The mirror data on Zhou Hao's laptop is being synchronized. He just needs to log into that encrypted system, and the complete log of file readings will be sent back. Let him log in now. I said, give him a clean device and let him operate it himself. You keep an eye on him, but don't interfere. Zhao Yan nodded and stepped into the ward. I stood in the corridor for a while, peeking through the crack in the door and seeing Zhou Hao being helped back to bed. Zhao Yan handed him an open tablet. His wounds were still bleeding when he took it, leaving a red mark on the white frame of the tablet. His fingers hovered over the screen for a long time. Then he started entering the password, 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines. The password was longer than the string of characters I'd coaxed out of him in the hospital. He glanced up in the direction of the door, probably knowing I was watching. But he didn't stop. A message popped up indicating successful decryption. Zhao Yan immediately took back the tablet, turned, and strode out of the ward. Everything was extracted. He turned the screen back to me. The file list scrolled down page by page. Most file names were in date and number format, but some file names were labeled in Chinese. This guarantee contract and this shareholder change record both showed Mo Yuan Industry as the related party. Zhou Mingyuan's signature appeared on all 3 documents, dated a week before Chen Zhangwo's accident. 3 copies were made, one for the audit file, one sealed for future reference, and the other sent to Qin Li. Zhao Yan replied, I understand. He turned and walked away quickly, the sound of his leather shoes tapping on the floor tiles fading into the distance. I stood in the corridor. The sun outside the window was fully risen, bathing the entire front of the hospital building in a bright white light. Several people were going in and out at the emergency room entrance downstairs, and a woman in a yellow coat was pushing an elderly person in a wheelchair slowly through the shadows under the sycamore trees. I felt my pocket. The crumpled letter was still there, the edges of the yellow craft paper frayed. I pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper and unfolded it. It was my father's handwriting. Pen on watermarked paper. The ink faded by a third, but every stroke was clear as if engraved. Shalamo, if you read this letter, it means your father is no longer here. There are people in the company I don't trust. I can't write who they are in the letter, but you'll find out when you grow up. Remember 3 things. First, all my assets are in an offshore trust, with your name as the beneficiary. The certificate is hidden in a lining of the jewelry box your mother used at her wedding. Second, there's a bad debt at my UN industry, and I'm the guarantor, but I never signed that contract. The money ultimately went to an account belonging to someone named Zhou Mingyuan. Third, if you get married in the future, remember to treat your spouse well. My biggest regret in life is that I didn't have enough dinners with your mother in my last few years. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Footsteps came from the end of the corridor. Zhao Yin returned, carrying a document. President Lin, there's been some activity from Qin Li. His lawyer just contacted us, saying that the joint and several liability liquidation clause in the equity transfer terms needs to be amended. They want to shorten the statute of limitations for Moyuan Industries' historical debts to within 3 years. No changes. I said, keep the terms as they are. If they don't sign by 3 p.m. tomorrow, it'll be void. I also told his lawyer that I have a copy of the guarantee contract for that bad debt at Moyuan Industry, and I suspect they know better than anyone where the original is. Zhao Yin smiled. I relayed this verbatim. After he left, I stood in the corridor and read the letter again. The last name in the second paragraph, Zhou Mingyuan. That was Zhou Hao's father, who left for Australia 8 years ago and never returned. Qin Li used his name to sign a false guarantee, putting a debt of 120 million yuan on Moyuan Industries' account, while the nominal guarantor was my father. My father never signed that contract. Neither did Zhou Mingyuan, but both of their signatures appeared on the contract. Qin Li hired 2 forgers, each practicing their handwriting for 6 months. Countless times over these 8 years, I've thought that if only my father had left one more sentence. Tell me who that person was. Tell me which direction to investigate. But he didn't. All he left behind was a letter, a hidden trust certificate, and a name, Zhou Mingyuan. I spent 6 years chasing him to Australia, finally finding the park where he fed the pigeons on a rainy afternoon. I didn't go up to him. I just sat on the bench opposite him and watched him for 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes, he hadn't finished feeding him a single bag of breadcrumbs. Pigeons circled around his feet. He was hunched over, his back severely hunched, a far cry from the spirited financial advisor in the photo from 8 years ago. I knew then that he was no longer a threat. But when his son's name, Zhou Hao, appeared on my company's interview list, my fingers, holding that piece of paper, paused for 3 seconds. After 3 seconds, I made a decision. Let him in. Let him think he's stealing from me. Let him lead Qin Li step by step into my trap. Then let everything end in one place. My phone vibrated. Zhao Yin messaged. Lawyer Qin Li replied. The terms remain unchanged. Signing tomorrow at 3 p.m. I replied with one word. Okay. As I hung up, a muffled thud came from the ward. I pushed open the door. Zhou Hao was slumped over the edge of the bed, his tablet lying beside him, the screen still lit, displaying the completed file extraction interface. His forehead was pressed against the back of his hand. The bleeding from his injured hand had stopped, and Zhao Yin had rewrapped the gauze neatly. He heard footsteps and looked up. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. You got everything, he said. You promised me a phone call after you sign your witness statement. Write down everything you said in the hospital room today and put your fingerprint on it. Zhao Yin will arrange the call time. I've already had someone tell your dad in advance. Zhou Hao's lips moved slightly. What did you tell him? He said there's a small problem with the property title in that Australian community, and he needs to confirm it in person. He'll be by the phone this afternoon. Zhou Hao lowered his head. This time, his shoulders finally started to tremble. Very slightly, like the kind of trembling someone huddled in a corner trying not to make a sound. His face was buried in his crossed arms, and the wound on his forehead started to bleed again, slowly seeping a small red ring around the edge of the gauze. I left the ward and closed the door. Zhao Yin was waiting by the window at the end of the corridor, holding a paper cup of coffee. He saw me come out and handed me the coffee. Things are almost done, Mr. Lin. Once Qin Li signs the papers tomorrow, Control of Moyuan industry will officially be yours. Once Zhou Hao's witness materials are finalized, your father's historical case can be reopened. I took the coffee and took a sip. It was hot. The bitterness melted on my tongue, warming me all the way to my stomach. What about Su Qing? I asked. She went to the new hospital to see her mother last night, staying for about 2 hours. The nurse said she was all right when she left. At least she didn't cry. She left a bank card, saying it was for the elderly woman's follow-up expenses. Return the card. The expenses will be deducted from my account. Just tell her mother. Zhao nodded. He hesitated by the window for a moment, then spoke. President Lin, there's something I'm not sure if I should ask. How much leeway do you leave for Su Qing? He continued. Those 6 nominee agreements. Each one had complete risk warning clauses when she signed them. She's an adult. Legally, she can't be completely exempt from liability. Sunlight streamed in through the window, falling on the corridor tiles and casting a long shadow of Zhao Yan. I leaned against the window frame, sipping my scalding coffee, watching the increasing traffic on the street outside. There was no room for maneuver. I said, her mother didn't do anything wrong. She left me that SOS email. These 2 things combined wouldn't push her to her death. But regarding her relationship with Zhou Hao, the 0 she wrote herself had already made the choice for her. Zhao Yan didn't press further. He glanced at his watch and said, it's 9:30. There's a morning meeting at the company. All the department heads are waiting for you. I finished my coffee, crumpled the paper cup, and threw it into the hallway trash can. Let's go. As the elevator descended, the floor numbers ticked down. I stood at the back. Zhao Yan stood to my right, a silent distance separating us. The elevator stopped on the first floor, and as the doors opened, sunlight flooded in, making me squint. The lobby wasn't crowded. The electronic screens were still displaying various hospital notices. I stepped out the door, the wind carrying the scent of sycamore leaves hitting my face. The temperature was a little higher than when I arrived, and the sunlight on my shoulders felt slightly stinging. Zhao Yan's car was parked by the roadside, a dark gray sedan. The dew on the hood just dried by the sun, leaving a few streaks of water. He opened the car door, and as I bent down to get in, my phone vibrated. It was a text message from Su Qing's number. Only 4 words. Thank you. No signature. No punctuation. I turned my phone over and placed it face down on my lap, leaning back in the seat and closing my eyes. The car started, the low vibration of the engine transmitting from the seat to my back, the alternating light and shadow from the window brushing against my eyelids. Zhao Yan spoke from the front. President Lin, before Qin Li signs the contract this afternoon, there's one more thing I need you to confirm. The call with Zhou Hao's father is scheduled for 8 p.m. tonight. Would you like to listen in? I opened my eyes and thought for a moment. No, I won't listen in. Just have the technical team record it. Zhao Yan glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Understood. The car turned onto the main road, and the city's buildings began to recede. I closed my eyes again amidst the bumpy rhythm, the phone in my hand still warm from the coffee I'd just had. Tonight at 8, Zhou Hao would hear his father's voice. I could guess 7 or 8/10 of what was left unsaid in that call without even listening. But that was between father and son. I'd stand on the sidelines, acting as a mediator, and let them handle the rest. The wind outside seeped in through the half-open window, carrying the mixed scents of the city's morning rush hour, the fumes from breakfast stalls, car exhaust, and the smell of newly sprouted leaves from the roadside trees. I leaned back in my seat, moving at a steady pace with the flow of traffic. Tomorrow afternoon at 3, Moyuan Industrial. 8 years. I touched the outline of the letter in my suit's inner pocket. The sharp edges of the pages poked at my chest through the fabric, causing a slight dull ache. The afternoon Qin Li signed the contract. The sky suddenly darkened. When I left the company, I could still see a pale white outline of the sun behind the clouds. By the time I arrived at the agreed location, raindrops were already pounding against the car windows. The signing ceremony was to be held in Moyuan Industries' own office building, an old 10-story building with a light beige exterior that looked rather dull in the rain. When Zhao Yan parked the car in front of the building, I saw 2 other cars already parked downstairs, Qin Li's black Audi and a silver-gray minivan, rainwater dripping from the hood and down the logo. Qin Li had arrived earlier. Zhao Yan turned off the engine. He had brought 3 people with him, his lawyer, a financial advisor, and a young woman, presumably his assistant. He seemed nervous. I unbuckled my seatbelt. Bringing 3 people to the signing ceremony meant he was still considering whether to revise the terms at the last minute. We went inside. The lobby was small. Behind the reception desk sat a middle-aged woman in a dark blue uniform who stood up when she saw us enter. She recognized me but didn't say anything, only pointing towards the elevator. The elevator went up to the 8th floor. The corridor was narrow, and the wall lamps cast a dim, warm glow. Chin Lee was already in the conference room. When I pushed the door open, he was standing by the window watching the rain, holding a cup of tea. His posture was the same as when I saw him in the hospital room, back straight, hands clasped. Only his stance had changed. He heard the door open and turned around. Today he was wearing a gray Zhongshan suit, a shade lighter than the dark one he wore last time. His hair looked freshly cut, and the gray sideburns were neatly trimmed. Xiaomo. He called me Xiaomo again, a smile returning to his face. You're on time. Uncle Chin is on time too. I walked to the conference table and sat down. The table was clean, with only a share transfer agreement and 2 pens on it. Zhao Yan sat down to my right, opened his laptop, and the screen faced the signing area. Chin Lee's lawyer was a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses. Tall and thin, his suit hung loosely on him, like a clothes hanger. He pushed the agreement to the center of the table and opened it to the signature page. Mr. Lin, we've confirmed all the terms. 57% of the equity in Moyuan Industry will be transferred to your Shenyuan holdings for a consideration 12% lower than the market valuation. After the transfer, Mr. Chin will no longer hold any position in Moyuan Industry, nor will he assume any historical liabilities prior to the benchmark date. I picked up the agreement and flipped through it. The terms were fairly standard, with Zhao Yan highlighting the key parts in red, the ones I wanted to see: joint and several liability retroactive application, historical guarantee liquidation, and confirmation of ownership of the shadow shares under Chun Jiangwo's name. The joint and several liability retroactive application clause stated 3 years. I pointed to that line. We previously discussed indefinite retroactive application. What does changing it to 3 years mean? Chin Lee's lawyer adjusted his glasses. Mr. Lin, 3 years is the standard retroactive application period stipulated by company law. Indefinite retroactive application lacks legal basis in practice, even if it's written in black and white in the agreement. Subsequent execution will face compliance obstacles. We suggest a compromise: 3 years plus a 1-year additional observation period, for a total of 4 years. I turned to look at Zhao Yan. He typed a few words on the computer and then turned the screen towards me. The above was a summary of the legal provisions he had just searched, showing that indefinite retroactive application did indeed present practical difficulties, but could be addressed through an independent guarantee clause. Add an independent guarantee, I said. I pushed the agreement back, stating that Uncle Chin would use his personal assets as collateral to assume ultimate responsibility for all historical debts incurred by Moyuan Industry during Chun Jiangwo's era. There would be no upper limit to the guarantee period, and a joint and several liability letter would be signed. Chin Lee's smile faded. He put down his teacup. The bottom tapped softly on the table, but the pause made the air in the conference room tighten. Xiaomo, you're asking me to use my entire fortune to bail you out. Not bail me out, I said, looking at him. It's bail you out yourself. You know best how those historical debts were formed. The guarantee letter is just a formality. If you're truly innocent, what difference does it make whether you sign it or not? Chin Lee stared at me for about 10 seconds. The rain outside intensified, pounding against the glass with a dense patter. The conference room lights shone on his graying sideburns, making him look like he had stepped out of an old photograph. He reached for the agreement, flipped to the last page, and signed his name after the handwritten supplementary clause. The sound of the pen gliding across the paper was particularly clear in the quiet space. Signed. He put down the pen. Lin Mo, if your father could see this scene today, he'd probably think I deserved it. I took the agreement and confirmed the signature. He can't see it, but I can. Chin Lee stood up and straightened the collar of his Zhongshan suit. His lawyer and financial advisor also stood up. Only the young female assistant remained seated, head down, looking at her phone. Chin Lee took 2 steps towards the door, then stopped. There's something I want to tell you. He didn't turn around. The morning your father had his accident, Chun Jiangwo called him. Nobody knows what he said. I've kept the recording of that call. Do you want it? I stood up. Yes. He took a USB drive from the inside pocket of his Zhongshan suit, placed it on the conference table, and pressed his finger on the black plastic casing. After listening to it, you might change some of your thoughts. Your father, like you, was one step ahead of everyone else. He finished speaking and left. The sound of leather shoes on the floor gradually faded away, and the elevator dinged and then fell silent again. I picked up the USB drive. Zhao Yin leaned over to take a look. President Lin, this might be a trap, or it might not. I put the USB drive in my pocket, decided to go through the formalities first, and submit the agreement to the legal department for filing. We'd deal with the USB drive when we got back. On the way back, the rain lessened a bit, and the windshield wipers swung back and forth, clearing a field of vision that quickly blurred. Zhao Yin took a call in the driver's seat, and after hanging up, he turned to me and said, Zhou Hao's witness materials are all signed and stamped. He'll talk to his father at 8 o'clock tonight. Do you want to adjust the time? No need. Stick to the original plan. I got back to the company around 5 o'clock. Old Zhang was waiting for me in the corridor, holding a form, this week's financial summary. President Lin, the equity change registration for Qin Li has been submitted to the industrial and commercial system, processed through the expedited channel. We expect to have the results by tomorrow afternoon. Okay. I went into my office and closed the door. I held the USB drive in my hand, its plastic casing slightly sticky from my body heat. I plugged it into the computer port, and a folder popped up on the screen containing only an audio file, 6 minutes and 42 seconds long. I clicked play. After a hissing sound, a man's voice rang out. It was my dad. His tone was flat, with his usual unhurried rhythm. I could almost picture him sitting at that old desk making a phone call. Zhangwo, let me finish. I've had the company's accounts audited. I know exactly where that bad debt went. The signature on the guarantee contract is forged. I have a handwriting analysis report. You don't need to say anything. Just listen to me. There's only one thing you need to do. Stop now. Report Zhou Yuan's actions truthfully, and I'll handle the rest. A rough, hoarse male voice interrupted. Urgent, old Lin. Do you know who's behind Zhou Yuan? Yes, I know. Let me finish. Get the documents to the notary office before 3 p.m. this afternoon, and I guarantee your safety. After 3 p.m., the handwriting analysis report would be sent directly to the Economic Crime Investigation Department, and then no one could cover it up. The recording suddenly stopped there, then resumed, with the sounds of a chair being pushed and breathing in the background. My father's voice came again, a little lower than before. Zhangwo, you have 2 hours. After 2 hours, you'll walk the path you chose. The recording ended. I sat at my desk, staring at the progress bar on the screen, the 6-minute and 42-second audio file silently stopping at the end. The rain outside had completely stopped, and twilight seeped in through the glass, casting a gray-blue shadow over everything in the office. My father had given Chun Zhangwo a chance. 2 hours. He made that phone call before 3 p.m. that afternoon and then waited at home for news. He didn't receive Chun Zhangwo's confession. Instead, he received the investigation team. At 2:50 p.m. that afternoon, Chun Zhangwo left his office. He went to a place, Qin Li's house. No one knows how long he stayed there. But after that point, no one ever saw him leave that building alive again. I picked up my phone and sent Zhao Yin a message. Help me check something. 8 years ago, between 2:50 p.m. and 5 p.m. that day, were there any records of the access control and elevator surveillance footage at Qin Li's apartment? The reply was quick. I'll check it right away. I unplugged the USB drive from the computer and put it in the deepest part of my desk drawer, next to the letter from my father. The two things, one written on paper, the other recorded in data, had ended up in the same corner of the same drawer, spanning 8 years. At 7:30 p.m., I sat in the coffee shop downstairs from the company, drinking an Americano. The street outside was wet, the streetlights reflecting shimmering gold on the puddle. Zhao Yin called. Mr. Lin, I've got it. The surveillance system in Qin Li's apartment complex used an old-fashioned hard drive video recorder 8 years ago, with a storage period of only 3 months. But there was a separate time clock in the lobby downstairs at Qin Li's apartment building, and the property management did a data backup once a year, with all entry and exit records sealed in the property archives. I had someone check the old paper logbook and found Chun Zhangwo's visit registration for that day. What time? 2:53 p.m. He signed it himself. The handwriting was verified. When did he leave? There was a pause on the other end of the phone. There was no departure time on the record. The time clock's exit column was blank, and there was no record of his departure in the property management's signature book. After he entered that building, there was no record of him clocking out or leaving. I put down my coffee cup. The remaining liquid at the bottom left a dark brown stain on the white inner wall. Zhao Yan, where's the original logbook now? The property management archives. I had it sealed up, and after taking a photo for my records, the original was left untouched. I also got something else. The elevator surveillance on Qin Li's floor doesn't cover the fire escape, but there's a private camera installed by a resident directly opposite the fire escape. That resident installed the camera 8 years ago because a package was stolen, and the footage is stored in the cloud, supposedly tracing back to recordings from as early as 7 years ago. 7 years isn't enough. I want the part from 8 years ago. Zhao Yan chuckled. I had the tech team communicate with that resident. They said the cloud backup company could theoretically recover earlier data, but it would take some time. How long? The tech team estimates about 48 hours. Wait, I said, don't alert Qin Li within 48 hours. Let him think we're done after signing the contract. Schedule Zhou Hao's call as usual tonight. Get as much of his father's statement as possible. Zhao Yan nodded and hung up. I sat in the coffee shop, watching the night deepen outside the window. The streetlights cast long shadows on the wet ground. An old song played in the coffee shop, its melody slow, the singer's voice hoarse and indistinct. At 8 o'clock sharp, Zhao Yan sent a message. Zhou Hao's call has started. I didn't reply. My finger hovered about 2 centimeters above the phone screen, a slightly cool touch in the air. I know that somewhere right now, Zhou Hao is holding a phone, and a man's voice will come from the other end, hoarse, old. A voice completely different from the one he remembers. I didn't ask how long the call lasted. At 10:30, Zhao Yan sent a second message. Call ended. Zhou Hao was in relatively good condition, not broken down. But after hanging up, he sat alone in the ward for a long time. The technical team recorded the entire audio, which included part of Chun Jiangwo's conversation that afternoon, in which Zhou Mingyuan personally admitted that he knew Qin Li's plan. I replied with one word, save. When I put down my phone, there were hardly any people in the coffee shop. The waiter was behind the bar wiping glasses. The overhead lights were dimmed, and the music had changed to a piano piece. I leaned back in the sofa and stared at the chandelier on the ceiling for a long time. I've walked a long road in these 8 years. From a 16-year-old child who received a letter to an adult who forces people to sign guarantee letters at a signing table. In between were countless sleepless nights. Countless times of finding clues only to have them disappear again. Every time I thought I was almost there, I was always pushed back to start all over again. But this time was different. This time, all the clues were in my hands. Zhou Hao's confession, Qin Li's signed guarantee letter, Chun Jiangwo's visit record, Zhou Mingyuan's phone recording, plus the private surveillance video that was about to be recovered. If that video captured the figures of people entering or leaving through the fire escape that afternoon, Qin Li would have no room for maneuver. My father's letter from back then mentioned 3 things: trust certificate, false guarantee, and the last sentence about being kind to others. I did the first 2 things, but I didn't do the third one well. When Su Qing wrote in that SOS email that Lin Mo saved me, I didn't go to save her immediately. Maybe this is the price. When a person tries to accomplish something, they inevitably let their guard down in some places. My phone lit up on the table. It was Su Qing's number. I answered, and there was a 3-second silence on the other end before her voice came through, sounding slightly more stable than a few days ago. Lin Mo, you're still awake? No. My mom's feeling a bit better today. The caregiver said she ate most of a bowl of porridge. I'm thinking of making her some pork rib soup tomorrow. She used to love my soup when she was sick. Your soup-making skills are SOSO. I said, the ribs need to be blanched twice. But you only blanched them once. A soft, short laugh came from the other end of the phone. Then teach me. I was silent for a few seconds. I'm free tomorrow afternoon. Buy the ribs and come to the office. There's a pot in the kitchen. Okay. She paused after that word, then hung up. Get some sleep. Okay. The call ended. I put my phone on the table. The screen went dark, and the piano music in the coffee shop had just finished its last note. The bartender placed the cleaned glasses upside down on the shelf, the glass reflecting a soft glow under the warm light. I stood up, put on my coat, and pushed open the door to step into the night. The floodwaters on the street had mostly dried up, leaving only shallow puddles reflecting fragments of streetlights and neon lights, splashing tiny droplets underfoot. The evening breeze was much cooler than during the day, carrying the damp, earthy scent unique to rain. I walked slowly. The streetlights were about 20 paces apart, each with a small, bright circular area beneath its beam. As I moved from one area to another, my shadow shortened and lengthened beneath my feet. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. I took it out and saw it was Zhao Yan's last message. The technical team had given a precise time frame. The monitoring data recovery was expected to be completed by 9 p.m. tomorrow night. I stood under a streetlight, watching the words linger on the screen for a few seconds before going dark. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. What exactly happened after 2:53 p.m. that afternoon 8 years ago? Who was the person who walked in and out of the fire escape? Was it Qin Li himself, or someone he had arranged? The answer lay in tomorrow night. I put my phone back in my pocket and continued walking. The streetlights illuminated the path I walked, one by one. Behind me, the afternoon sun was bright the next day. The sky after the rain was washed clean, a near-transparent blue. After finishing a few documents in the morning, I bought pork ribs from the supermarket downstairs from the company around 2 o'clock. Zhao Yan saw me carrying a plastic bag in the corridor and raised an eyebrow. "President Lin, what are you doing? Making soup?" I lifted the bag up slightly. Su Qing was coming. Zhao Yan's expression was subtle, but he didn't say anything, just stepped aside to let me pass. The company kitchen was at the end of the corridor on the second floor, a small room originally used for heating meals for employees working overtime. Later, I had a gas stove and a clay pot added. It was usually unused, and a thin layer of dust had settled on the countertop, which I rinsed several times under the tap. Su Qing arrived while the pork ribs were blanching. She was wearing a light blue sweater, her hair neater than a few days ago, tied in a low ponytail, and a thin layer of foundation covering most of the dark circles under her eyes. She stood at the kitchen doorway, carrying another bag of pork ribs, the same one I had bought. "I'm early." She stood by the door, shaking the bag in her hand somewhat awkwardly. Perfect timing. I blanched them once. You can blanch them a second time. I moved aside from the stove, told her to boil the water before putting the ribs in, and skim off the foam. She came over, rolled up her sleeves twice, revealing her slender white wrists. After the water boiled, she poured the ribs in, carefully skimming off the foam with a slotted spoon. Her movements more practiced than I remembered. "Have you practiced at home?" I watched her from the counter. "I cooked them myself a few times last month." She didn't look up. "You know, Zhou Hao never takes me out to Chinese restaurants. I always make my own pork rib soup when I want it." The way she said Zhou Hao's name was flat, without any inflection. It was like mentioning someone unrelated. I watched her take the blanched ribs out and rinse them in cold water. The water gurgled for a while. Then she turned it off. The water in the clay pot had already boiled. She put the ribs in and added a few slices of ginger. A simple aroma of meat slowly filled the kitchen, mixed with the crisp scent of ginger, permeating the small space. "My mom said she wanted soup yesterday, so I thought I'd come find you." She put the lid on the pot, turned around, and leaned against the counter, her hands resting on the edge. "Actually, I just wanted to talk to you." "Go ahead." She looked down at her toes. The sleeve of her sweater slid from her wrist to her elbow, revealing a faint pink scar on her forearm. Very shallow, like an old wound. "Those 6 nominee agreements from Zhou Hao. I actually knew the first one had a problem." Her voice was very soft. "That night, after I signed them, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I got up in the early morning and texted him saying, 'You asked me to sign. I'm so scared.' He didn't reply. The next day he called me, his tone extremely fierce, saying that if I didn't cooperate, he would send the photos to your phone. At that time, I was afraid you would see those photos. Afraid you would misunderstand and think I initiated things with him." "I know," I said. She paused. "You knew?" "After receiving that Lin Mo save me email, I saw the entire chat history. What you said to him, what he threatened you with, and thumbnails of those photos. You weren't shown in any of them, but he included your clothes and the background of your home in the photos. He couldn't provide proof of origin for those clothes, but he bet you'd be scared." Su Qing was stunned, her body, leaning against the kitchen counter, tensed slightly, then slowly relaxed. "You knew everything from beginning to end." Yes. Then why didn't you come to me? Her eyes began to redden, but her tone remained relatively steady. Since you knew I was forced. Why didn't you? Because I gave you a chance. I looked at her. In that chat history, there were a total of 473 conversations between you and him. One of the messages you initiated contacted him with was, "Joe How, I want to talk to you. Don't pressure me like that anymore." The rest were all initiated by him, with him giving instructions and you replying okay or understood. Out of over 400 passive replies, you only initiated contact once. And even then, you didn't dare say, "Don't take any more pictures of me." Su Qing turned her face away. The kitchen window was half open, and the afternoon breeze carried the scent of roses from the flower bed downstairs. I was so scared then. Her voice was muffled, as if squeezed from deep in her throat. I was afraid he wouldn't listen, afraid of his retaliation, afraid you wouldn't believe me because of those photos. Every day I thought, maybe I should just let it go. Anyway, Zhou said he'd only use it for a few months, and then he'd return the agreement to me. Every promise he made to you was a lie. You know that in your heart. She didn't answer. The soup in the casserole began to boil, the bubbling sound filling the gaps of silence. I went over and turned the heat down a bit. Steam rose from the edge of the lid, carrying an increasingly rich aroma. The soup still needed to simmer for another hour and a half. I put the lid on. "What time did you meet your mom?" 5 o'clock. She said she wanted soup with congee for dinner. "Then you'll have an hour and a half to wait. Let's go to the office. There's a sofa." I carried 2 cups of brewed tea into the office, Su Qing following behind. She sat in the corner of the sofa, holding the teacup with both hands, carefully taking a sip, and wincing at the heat. "Still that shop Oolong tea?" "Yes. New packaging. But the taste hasn't changed." She looked down at the logo printed on the paper cup for a while, then suddenly said, "Linamo, we really can't go back. Can we?" I didn't answer immediately. The sunlight outside the window was bright, illuminating the entire office. I sat in my office chair and turned to face her, a document I hadn't finished reading resting on my lap. "Do you want to go back? Or do you think you should?" Su Qing placed the teacup on her lap, her fingers slowly circling the rim. "I don't know. I hesitated for a long time before wearing this sweater today. You bought it for me. The blue one from last year's birthday. When I put it on, I wondered if you would remember that night on my birthday last year. If you opened the door and saw me wearing this sweater." She continued, "That night when I came home from get off work, you were asleep on the sofa, and a button was missing from your sweater. I sewed it back on for you. The stitches were crooked, and you laughed for a long time after you woke up." She lowered her head, her lips curving slightly before tightening again. "That button still fell off later. I replaced it with a light blue one, but the color was slightly different. You didn't notice." "I noticed," she said, but didn't say anything. Her shoulders trembled slightly. The office was quiet for a moment, the bubbling of a clay pot faintly coming from the other end of the corridor. Su Qing placed the teacup on the coffee table, her hands clasped together, her knuckles white from gripping them so tightly. "When I signed the divorce papers," she wrote the word 0. Her voice was very soft. "Not because I didn't want anything, but because I knew I had no right to want anything. You've been covering for me from beginning to end. You received that email but didn't blame me. You handled Zhou Hao's agreement without dragging me down. You arranged for 3 hospitals for my mother. I thought about all of this from beginning to end, and I understood. Lin and Mo has been more than kind to me." She didn't cry. She just quietly finished speaking, then picked up her teacup, took another sip, and held it to the rim for a few seconds. "Bring the soup over yourself when it's ready." I said, "I have things to do this afternoon. I can't go with you. I've already told the caregiver. You can go directly to the ward." Su Qing nodded. She put down her teacup, stood up, took 2 steps towards the door, and paused. "Linimom, your days will get better." After saying this, she didn't turn around, opened the door, and left. I sat in my office for a while, listening to her footsteps fade into the distance in the corridor, followed by the sound of the downstairs door opening and closing. The casserole was still bubbling away, its aroma wafting in through the crack in the door. My phone vibrated. It was Zhao Yan's number, President Lin. "The data recovery from that private surveillance camera is complete ahead of schedule. The technical team got the complete footage half an hour ago, between 2:53 p.m. and 5 p.m. 8 years ago. For people passed through the fire escape, 3 men and 1 woman, one of whom closely matched Qin Li's build and gait. The footage wasn't particularly clear, but it was enough for comparison. Send me the video. I stood up and walked towards the door, keeping a copy of the raw data, without any editing. Sent to your email. I returned to my desk and turned on my computer. There was a compressed file in the email, containing 4 video clips, time starting from 2:53 p.m. I clicked on the third clip. The timestamp in the lower right corner jumped to 3:41 p.m. A person walked out of the fire escape door. He was wearing a dark gray jacket, his hood pulled low, and his stride was slightly longer than average. His gait had a peculiar rhythm, like the disjointed urgency of someone accustomed to formal attire changing into casual clothes. The image was blurry, but I'd seen Chinli walk before, in the hospital ward, in the signing room, and in the office lobby. When he walked, his right shoulder was less than a centimeter lower than his left, and he always landed on the ball of his foot before his heel. The person in the video had a right shoulder less than a centimeter lower. I paused the video and sent Zhao Yin a voice message. Do a gait analysis of the person in the video. Compile the results into a written document, along with the transcript of Zhou Mingyuan's phone call, a photocopy of Chun Jiangwo's visit record, and my father's handwriting analysis report from back then. Integrate all of this into a complete chain of evidence and submit it to the auditing firm for filing before tonight. Received. Zhao Yin replied quickly. Meanwhile, regarding Chinli, the equity change registration had officially passed through the business registration system that afternoon. The legal entity of Mayuan Industry has been changed, and he is now nominally no longer associated with the company. Perfect. I shut down my computer. Without a company affiliation, his personal responsibility is clearer. I stood by the window and glanced down. The streets below were bustling with traffic. The city afternoon was ordinary yet hurried. No one knew that on this ordinary afternoon, a thread that had been tied together for 8 years was being secured with its final lock. Zhao Yin added on the phone, President Lin, there's one more thing. Zhou Hao suddenly asked to see you this afternoon, saying he had something to say in person. What's his situation? His mental state is all right. Much more stable than the past 2 days. His father's phone call seemed to have made him accept some reality. His assistant said he was very quiet all day, sitting on the bed writing several pages. Let him write. Bring it over when it's finished. I hung up the phone and stood in my office for a while. The sunlight outside the window had changed from the midday incandescence to the afternoon's slanting gold, casting long shadows from the window frame onto the floor. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor. Someone was walking this way, their pace neither fast nor slow. The sound of leather shoes clicking steadily on the floor tiles. The door opened. Zhao Yin stood in the doorway, holding a manila envelope, his expression more serious than I had expected. Mr. Lin, the auditing firm's initial feedback is that the completeness of the evidence chain exceeds the standard for filing a case. Also, he paused. Su Qing called me on the way here earlier, saying that when she arrived at the hospital, she found someone had come early. There was an extra bouquet of flowers in her mother's room. The nurse said it was delivered in the afternoon, and it was signed an old friend. I took the envelope from him. What kind of flowers were they? White roses. There was no card, only the 5 words written on the label. White roses. The only flowers my father ever grew were white roses, which he had kept in pots on the balcony for 7 or 8 years. Su Qing knew about this because I had told her the first year she married into the family. But Chinli didn't know. Zhou Hao didn't know either. I was the only one who knew. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. The handwriting so neat it was almost printed. Every stroke precise, as if measured with a ruler. Xiaomo, you got what you wanted. Some things you don't need to pursue to the end. Send a bouquet of white roses to your mother. She wants to smell the flowers over there. Qin. I held the note, reading it twice, then folded it and put it in my desk drawer, alongside my father's letter and the USB drive. Zhao Yin, there's no need to investigate the white roses. I know who sent them. As for the hospital, just have the nurses put the flowers on the windowsill. Don't take them away. Zhao Yin looked at me, hesitant to speak, but finally just nodded and turned to leave. The office fell silent again. The bubbling of the clay pot had stopped some time earlier. The soup was probably done and the heat had been turned off. A faint, lingering fragrance drifted down the corridor, seeping in through the crack in the door and dissipating. I closed and locked the drawer. The sunlight outside the window had completely transformed into the golden red of dusk, bathing the entire office in a warm hue. The city skyline stretched out in layers in the distance, the glass curtain walls reflecting the last rays of the setting sun, like scattered gold dust covering most of the sky. This afternoon, Su Qing made pork rib soup. She said her mother wanted soup with congee tonight. White roses sat on the windowsill. On the first day of their bloom, their petals slightly curled towards the setting sun. Some things weren't said today, and perhaps they never will be. But the soup was ready. The flowers arrived, and the knot was tied. Tomorrow will bring its own. The few pages of paper Zhou Hao had written were delivered to my office the next morning. Zhao Yan had personally brought them. A thick stack, wrapped in a transparent file folder, the edges neatly folded. He pressed down the corners of the file folder on his desk, as if to prevent the papers inside from being blown away by the wind. He had been writing for most of the night. The nurse said he was still working at 3 a.m., and when he handed over his shift in the morning, there were 12 pages of paper piled on his desk. He said he only went to sleep after finishing writing. How many hours did he sleep? About 4 hours. The nurse said he slept more soundly than the previous nights and didn't have any nightmares. I opened the file folder. Inside were 12 A4 pages, each page filled with dense writing in blue ballpoint pen. Zhou Hao's handwriting was a stark contrast to his personality. The strokes were tight, the turns rounded, as if someone had forcefully pressed themselves into a very narrow grid. The first page was about his father, Zhou Mingyuan, from the figure he remembered from his childhood, always working overtime in the study, to that evening 8 years ago when Zhou Mingyuan suddenly made 3 phone calls and then never saw him again. He wrote down the details of those 3 phone calls. His father's last words to him were, "Don't ask about what happens after this. Remember, Dad will always love you." And how he later spent 4 years piecing together his father's route out of the country from various clues. Pages 2 through 5 describe his interactions with Qin Li. Their first meeting was at a tea house. Qin Li ordered a pot of Tiguanyin tea and, while pouring it for him, said, "Your father owes me something. You're here to repay it." Zhou Hao said he didn't know what those things specifically referred to at the time, but Qin Li quoted a figure he couldn't refuse, 20 million, to be paid in 3 installments. After the first payment was made, he quit his investment banking job. Page 6 begins to describe what happened after he joined my company. He wrote that for the first 2 months after he arrived, he was waiting for an opportunity to get close to the core finance team. But I assigned Lao Zhang to keep an eye on him. Every day after get-off work, he would send Qin Li a report email, most of which was fabricated. He wrote that he felt guilty at first when he fabricated those false reports. But after fabricating so many, he started to believe them himself. Page 7 describes his first encounter with Su Qing, explaining that his original plan was simply to obtain information about my activities at home through her. But he had other ideas at the drinking party that day. He wrote that he knew it was immoral, but still did it because he found her very cautious in front of him, smiling in his presence. That feeling of being looked up to was addictive. Pages 8 through 10 describe his psychological changes in the last 6 months. He wrote that he was increasingly unable to distinguish whether he was helping Qin Li or fighting for something for himself, and that he felt a sense of victory every month when signing those nominee agreements. But at the same time, his insomnia was increasing. He wrote about one night when he sat on the balcony smoking, wondering what he would do if things were exposed. He couldn't think of anything at the time because he never thought he would lose. The last 2 pages were blank, with only one line written on them. I concede. I've said everything I needed to say. The rest will be handled according to the rules. I won't try anything funny. I finished reading all 12 pages, folded them, and put them back in the file folder. How is he doing now? I looked up and asked Zhao Yan. Very stable. Yesterday afternoon, after he finished writing these down and handed them to the nurse, he got out of bed last night, took a shower, changed into clean clothes, and even had the nurse shave him. This morning, he ate an egg and a bowl of porridge, more than he had eaten in the previous days combined. He was cleaning himself up. I locked the file folder in the drawer. When a person decides to accept a certain outcome, they suddenly become very clean. He wanted to tidy himself up before facing what came next. Zhao Yan didn't reply. He stood in front of his desk for a while, then took a white envelope from his suit's inner pocket and placed it on the table. The auditing firm's feedback this morning was that the entire chain of evidence had passed the preliminary review, and the process had officially started. This was a copy of the notification letter. The official document would be delivered to Moyuan Industry this afternoon. I opened the envelope and scanned the contents. It was a standard format, with the auditing firm's name at the top, and the text mentioned that based on relevant evidence and statements from the parties involved, a comprehensive investigation would be launched into the related economic issues suspected by Qin Li, the former controller of Moyuan Industry. The date on the cover was today. What was Qin Li's reaction? None yet. After signing the contract yesterday, he returned to his residence in the suburbs and didn't come out again that day. His young female assistant went to his residence this morning, stayed for about 40 minutes, and came out carrying a black briefcase. How big was the briefcase? About 40 by 60 centimeters, and about 15 centimeters thick. Judging by its volume, it wouldn't hold much cash, but if it contained paper documents or hard drives, its capacity would be considerable. Keep an eye on that female assistant. If anything she took appears in any bank or third-party institution, stop it immediately. Zhao Yan nodded and left. I sat in my office chair and read the notification letter again. Focusing on the third point, preliminary evidence shows that the case involves multiple violations, including forged signatures, false guarantees, and misappropriation of funds by related parties, with a total amount exceeding 300 million yuan. 300 million. That's a large enough number that anyone trying to suppress this matter will weigh the consequences. My phone lit up on the table. I picked it up and saw a photo Su Qing had sent, a bouquet of white roses on the windowsill of her mother's hospital room, the petals unfurling white in the sunlight. The background a profile of her mother leaning against the headboard, her gray hair neatly combed. Below was a line of text. She said the flowers smelled wonderful. I hadn't told her who sent them, but she said she remembered the smell of white roses, just like the ones on your father's balcony years ago. I looked at the photo for a few seconds, didn't reply with text, only sent a thumbs-up emoji. Then I flipped my phone face down on the table, opened my computer, and pulled up the complete equity structure diagram of Moyuan Industrial after the changes. 57% of the shares were transferred to Xinyuan Holdings. Another 34% were scattered among several small shareholders, and the remaining 9% were still under Qin Li's personal name, according to the agreement. That portion of the shares would be transferred in batches within the next 6 months. But if the audit process officially intervened, the disposal rights of that 9% would be frozen. The entire structure diagram looked like a disassembled and reassembled jigsaw puzzle, each piece repositioned in its new place. I stared at the screen for a while, closed the file, stood up, and walked to the window. Zhao Yan's dark gray sedan had just driven away downstairs, the engine's exhaust fading into the distance. The morning sun wasn't too strong, casting the plane tree leaves along the street as pale green, translucent sheets that rustled in the breeze. There was a knock on the office door. Old Zhang's voice came from outside. President Lin, the old employee files from Moyuan Industry have arrived. The roster and payroll records from 8 years ago that you requested are inside. The CFO said some of the paper documents are too old. The pages are brittle, so be careful when handling them. Bring them in. Old Zhang pushed open the door, carrying a dark gray tin filing box. The box wasn't large, but it looked heavy. He placed it on the coffee table, unlocked it, revealing a box full of yellow documents. Some of the paper edges were curled and brittle, and the top layer even showed obvious signs of dampness. These were the original rosters from Chun Jiangwo's era. Moyuan Industry had a total of 173 employees at that time. The CFO said this box had been sitting untouched in the corner of the warehouse for 7 years. They wouldn't have known it existed if you hadn't specifically asked for it. I went over and turned a page. The paper was indeed brittle. It felt like it was about to crumble to the touch, requiring great care to turn. The first page was a list of management, with Chun Jiangwo's name at the top, followed by the vice presidents and department heads. Qin Li's name was fourth, his position being Director of External Affairs. I scrolled down the list, my finger landing on a name, Lin Yuanshan. My father's name. The position section read Special Technical Consultant, but the start and end dates were blurred out. Only the last digit, 7, was vaguely visible, presumably the year he joined. The subsequent salary records showed that the special consultant allowance was paid monthly, but the starting month didn't match the actual time my father had worked at Moyuan Industry. Old Zhang, Is there any more detailed information about this special consultant allowance in the finance department? Old Zhang leaned over and looked at the page. I'll call the CFO. He should have a separate register of consultant contracts. He took out his phone and went out. I continued flipping through the roster, slowly reading each page. When I reached page 50th, I saw an initials in the middle management list, Zhou MY. The remarks section said financial advisor, but didn't specify the employment period. Zhou Mingyuan. His name was also in this roster. 48 pages away from Lin Yuanshan's name. There were 47 unrelated people in between, but they were all in the same old booklet from the same company. Chen Zhangwo, Qin Li, Lin Yuanshan, Zhou Mingyuan. All the people involved in that incident 8 years ago were all recorded in yellowed pages, sealed in a metal filing box for 7 years, and then reopened today. Old Zhang pushed the door open and came back, holding his phone screen. The CFO said that the advisor contract filing booklet was transferred to the legal department of Moyuan Industry last year when they were cleaning up old files. The legal department replied that it was still in the warehouse, but they needed some time to find it. How long? They said they could deliver it before the end of the day. I closed the roster and shut the metal box. Put it directly on my desk after it arrives this afternoon. Don't let it pass through a second hand. Old Zhang acknowledged and left. The office fell silent again. I sat back down in my chair. The metal filing box sat quietly on the coffee table, the afternoon sun streaming in through the window, casting a bright white patch on the metal lid. I opened my desk drawer, put my father's letter, Qin Li's note, and the USB drive together, then took out a piece of paper folded into 4 sections from the very back. It was written on my 16th birthday, hidden in the envelope after I finished writing it, and I hadn't even opened it for years. There was only one sentence on it, written in ballpoint pen, the strokes childish but forceful. Dad, I will find out about your matter, no matter how long it takes. I unfolded the paper and looked at it for a long time. The sunlight made it slightly translucent. The ink on the ballpoint pen had faded to a pale blue, but every word was still clearly legible. Then I folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and locked it in the drawer with the other things. My phone lit up again. Zhao Yin sent a short message. My female assistant went to a private safe deposit box company in the west of the city. She was inside for 12 minutes and came out without a suitcase. The contents of that box should be stored there. I replied, "What's the company called?" Hanyuan Safe Deposit Box. I checked the legal representative and actual controller. They're not directly related to Qinli, but Hong Yuan's registered address is in the same office building as the old site of Moyuan Industry, on the 3rd and 6th floors. The same building. Qinli chose a company with an address related to himself to store his things, but he picked a legal representative not directly related to him as a cover. This person has always been meticulous, even at the last moment trying to erase all traces of himself. Don't touch that safe deposit box. Have someone guard the outside of the building and record everyone entering and leaving that company. If Qin Li wants to retrieve something, he'll go in person or send someone. Intercept him when he does. Understood. I put down my phone. The sunlight outside had shifted, sliding from the desk onto the floor. The room was quiet, save for the low hum of the air conditioner and the distant noise of traffic. I had a few routine documents to sign that afternoon, and a departmental weekly meeting to attend. The mundane, repetitive tasks of life continued. An 8-year-old grievance had resurfaced. But as I turned the page, the work at hand didn't stop. I stood up, straightened my clothes, grabbed the unfinished procurement approval form, and left the office. The fluorescent lights in the corridor were blinding. Old Zhang walked past me, saying the afternoon's weekly meeting was ready. I nodded and headed towards the meeting room, my leather shoes clicking rhythmically on the floor. Passing the 2nd floor, I caught a faint, pleasant aroma, like the unwashed clay pot from this morning's soup. The pot was probably still on the kitchen stove, and after a night, a thin film of oil should have formed on its surface. It would need soaking to clean. I passed the kitchen door, which was ajar. It was quiet inside. The clay pot was still on the stove, its lid tightly shut. I took a step forward, then stopped. I turned and pushed open the kitchen door. Besides the clay pot, there was something else on the stove. A piece of white paper, folded into a small square, was placed under the lid of the clay pot, with the edge sticking out. On it was written a single word, "Eat." I lifted the lid and looked inside. It was half a pot of reheated pork rib soup. steam rising from the surface. The aroma of meat mixed with ginger wafting towards me. Next to it was a clean bowl and spoon, with a sticky note on the rim, written in Su Qing's handwriting. The strokes a bit more steady than last week. The pork rib soup was overcooked. Didn't you eat lunch? My mom said she was full after one bowl, so she asked me to bring you the rest. While it's hot, I put the lid back on, stood in front of the stove for a couple of seconds, then opened the drawer next to me, took out a bowl, ladled out a bowl of soup, and slowly drank it by the kitchen window. The soup tasted the same, with a few more red dates than the pot I blanched for her yesterday. The scalding liquid slid down my throat and into my stomach, warming me on the autumn afternoon. I washed the bowl and placed it upside down on the drainer. Then I closed the kitchen door and continued towards the conference room. At the end of the corridor, Lao Zhang peeked out from the conference room door. Seeing me, he called out, "President Lin, hurry up. Everyone's here." I quickened my pace and went inside. Sunlight streamed in through the conference room windows, illuminating the various documents spread out on the long table, making the white of the printed paper glaringly bright. People from each department were already seated, flipping through materials, some talking quietly. I sat down at the head of the table and took the meeting agenda from Lao Zhang. Let's begin. The weekly meeting lasted an hour and a half, and it was almost evening when it ended. Lao Zhang tidied up the documents on the table, and the heads of other departments got up and left one after another. I sat in my original spot, finished flipping through the last few pages of the procurement approval, signed it, and handed it to Lao Zhang. "Mr. Lin, the legal department said the consultant contract filing book for Moyuan Industry has arrived and is on your desk." I saw it. When I returned to my office, the sky outside was already darkening, with clouds rolling in from the west, obscuring most of the setting sun. On my desk was a dark blue hardcover filing book, half of the gold lettering on the spine worn away, barely revealing the words Consultant Contract 2008 to 2012. I sat down and opened the book. The pages inside were also yellowed, each page a condensed record of a contract, listing the consultant's name, reason for employment, contract amount, and signing date. After flipping through about 10 pages, I saw Lin Yuanshan's name. That record only occupied half a page. The reason for employment was listed as Technical Consulting, New Materials Project. The contract amount was 80.000 yuan per year, and the signing date had been altered once, originally March 2010, later crossed out with correction fluid and changed to June 2011. The writing beneath the correction fluid was still faintly visible through the back of the paper. The original 2010 had been deliberately altered. I took a picture with my phone and continued flipping through. Near the end of the booklet, Zhou Mingyuan's name appeared. His registered employment was for financial structure design, with a contract amount of 120.000 yuan per year and a signing date of January 2012. This date showed no signs of alteration, but there was a line of handwritten small print in the remarks column, "Supplementary agreement attached." The phrase "supplementary agreement attached" meant that this record book did not contain everything. The actual cooperation between Zhou Mingyuan and Moyuan Industry was much more extensive than what was written on this page. I closed the record book and sent a message to Zhao Yan. There is a consultant contract record book in Moyuan Industry's old archives, and Zhou Mingyuan's entry has a note saying "supplementary agreement attached." Check where the original supplementary agreement is kept. Also, the signing date of my father's contract has been altered. The original date was March 2010, which was changed to June 2011. What does this time difference mean? Have someone analyze it. Zhao Yan's reply came quickly. I'll check on the supplementary agreement. I'll ask the audit firm's consultant about the time difference. I'll get back to you when I have news. I put the filing book back on the upper right corner of my desk, next to the old roster in the tin box. Both books were old. One recorded names, the other contracts. Piecing them together, they looked like a shattered map. The twilight outside the window grew heavier. The city skyline became a black silhouette against the dark blue sky, and the office buildings in the distance began to light up one by one. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a while, going through all the information from today in my mind. The 12-page handwritten statement, the audit firm's official notification letter, the female assistant's briefcase in the safe deposit box, the altered dates in the consultant's contract filing book. Each item, when viewed individually, was just scattered fragments. But when pieced together, they presented a clear direction. Those fragments pointed in the same direction. What happened after Chen Jiangwo walked into Qin Li's building 8 years ago that afternoon? My phone vibrated again. Zhao Yan sent a voice message, which I played. President Lin, the consultant from the auditing firm reviewed your explanation of the time difference. He said there's a point in time between March 2010 and June 2011, which is the initial window of time when Chen Jiangwo was investigated. If Lin Yuanshan's original contract signing date was March 2010, it means he was already engaged in related technical work before being formally hired by Mayuan Industry. The contract date was changed to June 2011, just 2 months before Chen Jiangwo's incident. He wondered what the purpose of the alteration was. The consultant's original words were that if Lin Yuanshan's employment date were pushed forward by a year, his technical cooperation with Mayuan Industry would span the entire period from when Chen Jiangwo began to be investigated externally. Changing the date might be to include all the consulting work he did during that period outside the formal employment period, thereby severing some legal ties. I listened to this recording again. Zhao Yan's mention of that time window struck a chord within me. From March 2010 to June 2011. My father participated in Mayuan Industries' technical work as an informal consultant for 1 year and 3 months. And Qin Li later artificially moved his employment date back 15 months, effectively erasing most of his contributions from the records. It wasn't to harm him. It was to make his contribution disappear. As I was thinking this, the office light flickered. The backup generator downstairs roared and then stopped. Probably the power grid switching lines. Immediately afterward, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Hurried but steady. Approaching. The door opened. Zhao Yan stood in the doorway, breathing slightly faster than usual, holding a new document. President Lin, there's movement at the Hanyuan safe deposit box. At 6:03 p.m., someone with authorization took the black briefcase. The person who picked it up wasn't Qin Li, nor the female assistant, but a middle-aged man we hadn't seen before, wearing a hat and mask. The people outside couldn't stop him. He drove south. Did you note the license plate number? Yes. Checking the registration information. It was a rental company car, and the renter's identification was fake. But the people outside took photos of the person's shoulder and profile. The technical team is comparing them to the facial recognition database in the system. How long will it take to get the results? About 40 minutes. Zhao Yan stood at the door, still holding the document. I noticed his other hand was behind his back, as if he was holding something but hadn't handed it out. What else was in his hand? He took his hand out from behind his back, revealing a small clump of ash in his palm, grayish-white, finely broken like the residue left after paper had burned. He held it in a tissue and carefully placed it on my desk. This was something he'd found that afternoon in a corner of the old archives at Mayuan Industrial. The warehouse manager said someone had checked the old files that morning, and after they left, he found traces of burning in the trash can. The ash hadn't burned completely. After picking it up, we noticed there were cut edges of paper on it, like parts torn from a contract. I crouched down and examined the clump of ash more closely. At the edge of the ash was a small, unburnt piece of white paper, with ink residue on half a letter, which looked like the right half of the character fu. Supplementary agreement. The supplementary agreement attached to Zhou Mingyuan's entry. Someone had taken that agreement before me and burned it. The person who went to the archives this morning. That must have been another contact arranged by Qin Li. At the same time he signed the contract with us, he simultaneously initiated the destruction of evidence. I stood up and looked at Zhao Yan. The original supplementary agreement had been burned, but there was still a way to retrieve the content. What way? The record book I photographed contained Zhou Mingyuan's contract registration number. The number corresponded to Mayuan Industries' internal record management system. Although that system was old, every piece of original data had an electronic backup. The paper documents in the archives could be burned, but the electronic archives, if they hadn't deleted them. Zhao Yan's eyes lit up. I immediately contacted Mayuan Industries' IT department to see if the backup of the old system was still there. I called Lao Zhang to go with me. He knew the person in charge of the IT system at Mayuan Industry. If the backup data was indeed preserved, we could copy it directly, without going through the network. Zhao Yan turned and walked away quickly. The footsteps in the corridor quickened again, the sound of leather shoes echoing down the stairs, getting farther and farther away. I looked at the pile of ashes on my desk in my office. There was very little ash, just a clump the size of a fingernail, spread out on the white tissue like a small, crushed leaf. Half of the character fu, was clearly discernible on the remaining edge of the paper. The stroke ending with a slight upward curve, a characteristic of handwriting. Someone had handwritten on that supplementary agreement and then burned it. I carefully picked up the tissue, placed it in the empty pencil case on the table, and closed it. Then I sat back down in my chair, looking out at the completely dark night. The city lights had merged into one, stretching from the nearby streets to the distant horizon, like a net inlaid with shards of light spread across the ground. Looking at those points of light through the window pane, I suddenly realized my hands were steady, not trembling, not cold. From that letter 8 years ago to that clump of ash this afternoon, everything was in its proper place. My phone screen lit up. Zhao Yan's voice, his voice brimming with barely suppressed excitement. The people in the information department have been found. The complete backup of the old archive system was stored on an offline server in Moyuan Industrial's computer room, untouched for 8 years. They were importing data and expected to have the electronic version of all supplementary agreements in half an hour. I replied with one word, wait. When I put down my phone, the office was quiet. Only the low hum of the air conditioner and the cooling fan of the computer on the desk were making noise. The empty pencil case sat quietly in the corner of the desk, its ashes lying peacefully wrapped in a white tissue. I reached out and opened the drawer, glancing at my father's letter. The letter was neatly folded, the frayed edges just as they were 8 years ago. I didn't take it out, but just looked at it, standing neatly in a row in the drawer's hidden compartment, alongside Chin Lee's note, the USB drive, and the piece of paper I wrote when I was 16. A very bright star peeked out from behind the clouds outside the window. The city lights were too bright. Most stars were invisible, but this one was exceptionally bright, hanging in the southwest of the dark blue sky, like a small lamp that had been turned on by someone. I leaned back in my chair and looked at that star for a long time. Then Zhao Yan's voice came through. I played it, and his voice steadied, carrying a reassuring confidence. We've got all the data. There are 3 supplementary agreements, totaling 87 million. Zhou Mingyuan's signature, my father's name, and the third-party seal, all are there. The electronic version is already encrypted and archived on the local server. The original copies will be provided tomorrow. Okay. I turned off my phone and closed the drawer. The latch clicked softly, particularly clear in the quiet office. The stars outside the window were still shining. The city night continued. I sat in my chair for a while, then stood up, turned off the desk lamp, and left the office. The corridor was quiet, the fluorescent lights illuminating the empty passageway. When I reached the 2nd floor, I passed the kitchen door again. The casserole dish inside was empty, the lid upside down on the drainer, and the bowl next to it was dry. I paused. Then I gently closed the kitchen door and continued downstairs. In the lobby downstairs, my colleague on duty was sitting behind the front desk looking at his phone. He looked up and greeted me when I came out. I nodded, pushed open the door, and stepped out. The night breeze hit me, carrying the cool and refreshing scent unique to autumn. The streetlights illuminated my way home. The next morning, Zhao Yan brought all the recovered electronic data from the old archive system of Moyuan Industry to my office. There were 3 complete electronic versions of supplementary agreements, stored on an encrypted USB drive, along with a timestamp record of the data recovery and the access logs of the original server. The IT department had confirmed that the electronic versions of these 3 agreements had been stored on the offline server for 8 years, with the last modification date being June 14, 2011, and no access or editing records afterward. Zhao Yan placed the USB drive on the table. Although the original paper version had been burned, the electronic version was 100% complete, including electronic copies of the signatures of all 3 parties and images of the seals across the bindings. What was the core of the agreement? All 3 were supplementary clauses regarding Moyuan Industries' financial guarantee to a company called Hengyuan Mining. The guarantee amounts are 23 million, 31 million, and 33 million respectively, totaling 87 million. Your father's name is signed in the guarantor section, but the date on the signature is a full 10 months different from the main contract date. The consultant's exact words were that such cross-year supplementary guarantees are extremely difficult to explain financially. If the main contract has already been fulfilled, the relevance of the supplementary guarantee is simply untenable. In other words, there is direct evidence to establish the fact of a false guarantee. Yes, with the 3 supplementary agreements and the previous forged signature identification report, the completeness of the evidence chain far exceeds the standard for filing a case. I unplugged the USB drive, put it in the drawer, and locked it. Any new developments from Qin Li's side? Zhao Yan's expression became somewhat subtle. The identity comparison results for the recipient of the Hanyuan safe deposit box are in. It was done overnight. The middle-aged man's facial features highly matched those of a person named Lu Jianping. Lu Jianping is the younger brother of Qin Li's current wife. That is, his brother-in-law. This person does not own any company entities, but owns 3 properties and 2 cars. All assets were purchased within the last 3 years. The briefcase he took most likely contained physical documents related to funds. I leaned back in my chair and thought for a moment. After Qin Li signed the equity transfer agreement, he transferred his personal assets, and that briefcase was the last batch. He wanted to transfer them out through his brother-in-law and deal with them slowly after things calmed down. So for now, we'll leave it alone. Let him think the things are safe. His brother-in-law won't hide the briefcase for long. He'll definitely find an opportunity to hand it over to Qin Li himself. We'll act the moment he hands it over. Catching him red-handed, Zhao Yan nodded and turned to leave. I sat in my office and carefully reviewed the electronic versions of the 3 supplementary agreements. The guarantee clauses in each agreement were vaguely written, the core sentence being that Party B provides unlimited joint and several liability guarantees for the financing needs of Hongyuan Mining, a related company of Party A. The name of Party B is my father. The 3 characters in the signature section are extremely realistic. If it weren't for a handwriting expert's careful comparison, the difference would be almost indistinguishable to the naked eye. The 3 agreements total 87 million. Who ultimately received that money is not mentioned in the supplementary agreements. But Zhou Mingyuan's name appeared as a witness at the end of every document. He witnessed the signing of these 3 false guarantees and then spent the next 8 years feeding pigeons in Australia. I closed the document, stood up, and walked to the window. On the street below, a black sedan slowly drove up and stopped on the opposite side of the road. The windows were tinted dark, so I couldn't see who was inside. But the car was parked directly opposite the exit of our company building. I looked at the car for a few seconds, then turned around, picked up the internal phone, and dialed the front desk. Did you see that black sedan across the street? The license plate number ends in 792. I saw General Manager Lin. The car was parked for about 3 minutes, but no one got out. Keep observing. If the person inside gets out, I'll recognize their face. After hanging up, I returned to my seat and silenced my phone. Several routine documents that needed to be signed that morning were spread out on the desk. I picked up a pen, flipped through them one by one, and signed them. The fluorescent lights outside shone brightly into the corridor, and occasionally 1 or 2 colleagues passed by the door, their footsteps light and quick. About 20 minutes later, the front desk called. Mr. Lin. The person in that black sedan got out. A man in a dark gray coat, about 50 years old, and rather thin. He didn't come in. He just stood next to the car, made a phone call, and then got in and drove away. Did you get a picture of his face? Yes, I did. I'll send you the screenshot from the surveillance camera. I opened my email and glanced at the screenshot. The person in the picture was turned to the side, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, with a well-defined jawline and neatly combed hair. I didn't recognize the face, but his posture reminded me of something, feet shoulder-width apart, right hand in his pocket, left hand holding the phone close to his ear. This posture was very similar to the financial advisor next to Qin Li. But that person was shorter than Qin Li's financial advisor, and his shoulder width was different. I forwarded the screenshot to Zhao Yan with the message, investigate this person. Cross-reference him with Qin Li's list of related parties. Less than 10 minutes later, Zhao Yan called. Mr. Lin, the comparison results are in. This person was Chun Jiangwo's former personal secretary, named Sun Hao. He left his job after Chun Jiangwo's incident. For the next 8 years, His social activities were almost non-existent. He held no company or position, and his social security contributions were interrupted for several years. However, in Moyuan Industries' information system, there was an IP login record for him last month. Accessing the old archives search page, Sun Hao, Chen Jiangwo's personal secretary, the person who disappeared 8 years after Chen Jiangwo's incident, appeared on the roadside downstairs from our company today. Was he an accomplice when he burned the supplementary agreement last night? Zhao Yan paused. The technical team is still investigating, but Sun Hao's IP login record doesn't match the time the warehouse manager said this morning. Someone went to check the old files this morning. He had cell phone signal location tracking elsewhere at that time this morning. The person burning the supplementary agreement must be someone else. That makes 2 people. One burning the agreement, the other standing on the roadside. Qin Li has brought back all his people from 8 years ago. Zhao Yan was silent for 2 seconds. President Lin, this means Qin Li has reached the point where he's exhausted all his pawns. He's probably already used all his connections. Yet he's unusually quiet. He's quiet because he has no way out. He wants to see if I'll take the initiative to talk to him. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Will you contact him? I looked out the window at the empty street again, the sunlight casting a pale golden sheen on the asphalt. Yes, but not now. His brother-in-law's briefcase hasn't been touched yet. Sun Hao has just shown his face, and the person who burned the agreement hasn't been identified. I'll contact him after all these things are revealed. Let him wait a couple more days. The longer he waits, the more likely he is to make a mistake. After hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time. The afternoon sun slanted in through the window, casting a slanted band of light on the desk. Tiny dust particles floated slowly within the band of light, like tiny particles baked by the heat. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Zhao Yan sent another message. The person who burned the agreement has been found. He's an administrator in the old archives of Moyuan Industry. Someone Qin Li just assigned to this job in March. This person stayed in the warehouse operations area for 47 minutes yesterday afternoon and left with a black plastic bag. Surveillance footage showed a corner of light blue paper peeking out of the bag, matching the color recorded in the logbook. Where is he now? Still on duty. The technical team monitored his communication records. Between 4 p.m. yesterday and 9 a.m. this morning, he dialed an encrypted number. The signal location pinpointed to be near Qin Li's suburban residence. I replied, don't alarm him. Let the warehouse operate normally. Wait for him to spread the message that the files have been destroyed and completely reassure Qin Li. Only when he's reassured will he have time to deal with that suitcase. After making the arrangements, I turned off the computer screen, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes for a while. All the people and events in my mind surfaced one by one, then sank back down, like stones at the bottom of a river being washed out and submerged again. In the evening, Su Qing sent a message. I delivered the pork rib soup to Mom today. She said the method you taught me of blanching the ribs twice worked. The soup became much clearer. She also said she wanted to ask if you were free this weekend so she could thank you in person. After reading the message, I replied, I'm free this weekend afternoon. Tell her I'll come see her. Su Qing replied with a okay, and then added, let me know before you come. I'll start making the soup beforehand. I put my phone down. The sky outside the window was already mostly dark. The clouds dyed in varying shades of orange-red by the setting sun. The air conditioner in the office was still running, emitting a steady, low-frequency hum. I sat up, tidied my desk, and then took everything out of the drawer one by one to check. My father's letter, Qin Li's note, Zhou Hao's confession, the audit firm's notification letter, the electronic version of the consultant's record book, and the backup USB drive containing 3 supplementary agreements. I held each item for 2 seconds before putting it back. The last thing I put in was the piece of paper I wrote when I was 16. The pale blue handwriting in the ballpoint pen lay deep in the drawer, squeezed together with all the newly received materials. It looked the oldest and smallest, but it was the beginning of everything. I locked the drawer and turned off the desk lamp. When I walked out of the office building, the streetlights were already on. There were no cars on the opposite side of the road. That man named Sun Hao had come and gone, leaving only an empty stretch of asphalt. I stood on the steps and looked up at the sky. The thin clouds were tinged with a dark purple by the city lights. There were no stars, and the air carried the mixed smell of dust and exhaust fumes accumulated throughout the day. The wind was colder than it had been a few days ago, and it felt slightly rough on my face. I walked down the steps, took a few steps towards home, and then stopped. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and saw a text message from an unknown number, containing only one line. "Xiao, you've gotten enough. Stop. Your father didn't want things to come to this." There was no signature, but only one person in the whole world calls me that. Chinli. I stared at that line of text for a long time, then saved the number to my contact list. No reply. I put my phone back in my pocket and continued walking. The streetlights stretched out in front of me, illuminating the way home. I arrived at the private hospital at 1:30 p.m. on a weekend afternoon. The building wasn't big. The exterior was painted light pink, and 2 rows of holly bushes stood neatly trimmed in front of it. Su Qing was sitting on a bench downstairs waiting for me, wearing a white knitted cardigan, her hair loose, holding a steaming cup of drink. She stood up when she saw me and handed me the drink. "I bought this for you. Soy milk from the shop downstairs. My mom said you used to drink soy milk for breakfast when you visited her, so she asked me to bring you a cup." I took it and took a sip. It was warm, and the sweetness was just right. "How is she?" "She's in good spirits today. She even got out of bed and walked around the corridor a couple of times this morning. The caregiver said her recovery is faster than expected." Su Qing walked beside me, her pace neither fast nor slow, about a step and a half apart. She kept mentioning me, saying she wanted to see how I looked now, whether I'd lost weight or gained weight. "A little thinner. I noticed too. Your chin is sharper." The elevator went up to the 5th floor. The corridor was quiet, the smell of disinfectant fainter than at the hospital in the west of the city. Su Qing pushed open the door to the ward at the end of the corridor, and I followed her in. The old lady was sitting against the headboard, her gray hair neatly combed, a light green blanket covering her. The white roses on the windowsill were still there, the edges of the petals slightly curled, but still very clean white. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and she sat up a little straighter from under the covers. "Xiaomo's here. Please sit down. Please sit down." She patted the chair beside the bed. "Ching Ching, go get me a glass of water." Su Qing responded and went out. I sat down in the chair, and the old lady looked me over carefully for a few moments, then patted the back of my hand. Her hands were warm, her fingers calloused from years of housework, and she patted my hand lightly. "You've lost weight," she said. "Your chin is so sharp. These past few years have been tough on you. That girl's been a handful." "I know. Auntie, just focus on getting better. Don't worry about anything else." The old lady sighed. She turned to look at the white roses on the windowsill, her gaze lingering on the petals for a moment. "Xiaomo, did you have those white roses delivered?" Ching Ching told me she didn't know who sent them. "But I do. I saw your father's pot of white roses. 17 bloomed the summer he passed away. I counted them." I didn't speak. She looked away from me, her eyes clouded from her recent illness. But her gaze was clear. "That girl made a lot of mistakes. I know that as her mother. But she always wanted to turn back. She was just too timid, terrified. I won't interfere in your relationship. I just want to say, if you're still willing, take it slow. If you're not, that's okay too. I'll remember your kindness." "That's enough." Su Qing returned with a water glass and stood at the door, pausing when she heard the last sentence. She placed the glass on the bedside table, then went back to sit in the chair by the window, fiddling with her fingers. The room was quiet for a moment. The sunlight outside shone on the white roses, making the petals look like translucent silk. The old lady leaned against the headboard and closed her eyes, her breathing slowly becoming even and calm, as if she had fallen asleep after saying a few words. Su Qing stood up and quietly walked to my side, lowering her voice to say, "She gets sleepy easily these days from talking too much. Let her sleep. Let's go sit outside." I followed her to the rest area at the end of the corridor, where there were 2 sofas and a coffee table. On the coffee table was a potted green ivy with long, drooping leaves. Su Qing sat down on the sofa, and I sat down too. "Did you hear what your mother said just now?" She nodded, looking down. "She was talking to you about whether or not to leave any room for negotiation. I didn't really think that much about it. I just felt you deserved someone to treat you well. Your mother deserved someone to treat her well too. I said I'd come see her whenever I had time on weekends. You didn't have to come with me every time." She glanced at me. That glance was brief, but it carried something she rarely showed before. Not guilt or flattery, but more like confirming something. "Okay," she said. We sat on the sofa in the lounge area in silence for a while. There was a half-open window at the end of the corridor, and the autumn wind blew in from outside, carrying a bird's call or two from afar. Su Qing reached up and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. A very gentle movement. "How's Zhou doing now?" she asked, very naturally, as if she were talking about someone unrelated to her. "He's finished cooperating with the audit process. His father returned from Australia to assist with the investigation, and he himself is going through the plea process. The specific handling will wait for the audit agency's final conclusion. But judging from the current situation, he won't be in jail for too long. After all, the extent of his cooperation is evident." "Then, where is he now?" "At the hospital, still in the same ward. But no one needs to watch over him anymore. He knew he couldn't escape it, so he chose the path of cooperation when he finished writing those 12 pages." Su Qing was silent for a while. "Did he mention me in those 12 pages?" "There was a whole page about you." I looked at her. "But what he wrote was different from what you thought. He wrote about why he had those feelings for you. He said it was because he could find a sense of superiority in front of you that he couldn't find in front of anyone else. It had nothing to do with you as a person. It was purely his own problem." After hearing this, Su Qing lowered her eyelids. The corners of her mouth curved slightly, but the curve was short and didn't quite look like a smile. "I used to be quite afraid of him. So afraid that I would wake up in fright if I dreamed about him at night," she said softly. But she wasn't afraid anymore. "A few days ago, I thought about it all night and realized that all the energy I wasted on him. If I had used it to tell you earlier, Lin Mo, I can't take it anymore. Maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe not," I said. "But I can't say for sure. There are no what-ifs about the past. And saying these things now won't change anything." Su Qing looked up at me. The afternoon sun streamed in through the half-open window, illuminating half of her face while the other half remained hidden in the shadow of the sofa. "I know," she said. The lounge area fell silent. A breeze outside rustled the leaves of the pothose plants. I leaned back on the sofa and placed my paper cup of soy milk on the coffee table. Only a sip remained. The sweetness had settled to the bottom. My phone vibrated. I took it out and saw a message from Zhao Yan, President Lin. "Lu Jianping has made his move. At 1:20 this afternoon, he left his residence with that black briefcase, and his vehicle is currently heading towards the suburbs. Judging from the route, his destination should be Qin Li's suburban residence. The people on the perimeter are following him." I replied, "Wait until he enters Qin Li's courtyard before making any moves." The moment he entered the doorway, Su Qing glanced at me. "Something urgent?" "Just some finishing touches." I stood up. "Tell your mother I'm leaving when she wakes up. I'll come see her again next weekend." Su Qing also stood up. We stood in the light of the lounge area, about 2 steps apart. She reached up and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, then smiled at me. "Let me know when you come next weekend, so I can make some soup in advance." "Okay." I turned and walked towards the elevator. After a few steps, I heard her voice behind me, not loud, but clear in the empty corridor. "Lin Mo." I stopped and turned to look at her. She stood by the half-open window, the bright afternoon sunlight shining behind her. The petals of the white rose on the windowsill were gently curled and unfolded by the wind. She had a very faint smile on her face, different from the cautious, tearful, or unsettling smiles she used to have. "See you next weekend," I said. "See you next weekend." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in. As the doors closed, I saw her still standing by the window for the last time, the wind making the hem of her white cardigan flutter slightly. The elevator descended. I took out my phone and texted Zhao Yan. "How long until we get to Qin Li's place?" "About 15 minutes. The people outside are waiting for you at the next intersection." "I'm coming now." Stepping out of the hospital gate, the afternoon sun was blinding. I quickly walked to the dark gray sedan parked by the roadside, opened the door, and got in. The person in the driver's seat handed me a Bluetooth headset, which I put on, and I heard Zhao Yan's voice coming from inside. "Mr. Lin, Lu Jianping's car has entered the street where Qin Li is. It's expected to arrive at the hospital gate in 3 minutes." "Okay, wait until I get there before you start." The car started. The street scenes rushed past the window, the shadows of the plane trees flashing across the windshield. I sat in the back seat, watching the road gradually widen ahead, my hands resting on my knees, my fingers gently spreading and closing. 3 minutes later, The car stopped at the street corner of Cheen Lee's suburban residence. I looked through the window. A two-story detached house. Gray exterior walls. A black Audi and a silver minivan parked at the gate. The windshield of the black Audi was covered with a thin layer of dust, indicating it had been parked there for some time. Lou Jianping's car was parked outside the gate. A tall, thin man in a dark gray jacket stood by the car door, holding a black briefcase, and was ringing the doorbell. Zhao Yan's voice came through the earpiece. The people outside are in position. Do you want to come in? I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the car door. Come in. I got out of the car, my leather shoes making short, sharp sounds on the asphalt. The autumn sun shone on the gray courtyard wall, making the texture of the wall exceptionally clear. The doorbell rang, and Lou Jianping, standing at the door, turned and saw me, the briefcase in his hand weighing down. Qin Li opened the door from the inside. He stood inside, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His face was expressionless when he saw me, but I noticed his fingers, hanging at his sides, curled slightly. Xiaomo, he called to me. Come inside and talk. It's cold outside. I walked up the steps, glancing at the briefcase in Lou Jianping's hand as I passed him. His fingers were clenched tightly, his knuckles white. Qin Li stepped aside to let me through the doorway. Come in. I stepped over the threshold and went inside. The courtyard gate behind me slowly closed in the wind, making a soft sound.